The bullies picked on the wrong black girl. What she did shocked everyone. Zoe Thompson watched the two boys hide behind their hands, tears streaming between their fingers as the entire school looked on in silence. What had started as just another day of taunts and humiliation had turned into something no one expected. 3 weeks earlier, the 10-year-old girl had arrived at John Dewey Elementary School in the Rosedale Heights neighborhood of Portland, carrying only a worn-out backpack and the unshakable determination she'd inherited from her mother. Denise Thompson, a cleaner at a small accounting office, had managed to secure a transfer to that school after much insistence with the municipal education department. She knew her daughter would have better opportunities there, even if it meant waking up an hour earlier every day to take the bus. On her first day of school, Zoe sat in the third row of the 5th grade classroom, her carefully braided hair swaying gently as she turned her head to observe her new classmates. Her white shirt was immaculate, ironed with all the care Denise could muster, and the gray uniform skirt, though second-hand, had been perfectly adjusted. That's when Tyler Williams and Ethan Johnson noticed her. Tyler, an 11-year-old boy with blonde hair and light eyes, the son of the owner of a small local bakery chain, was used to being the center of attention. Since childhood, he'd heard adults tell him how special and different from other kids he was. Ethan, his best friend and loyal sidekick, came from a family that owned 2 pharmacies in the neighborhood. Both shared not only the same social class, but also the conviction that they were superior to the other students. The first taunt came during recess. Zoe was sitting alone on the bench near the cafeteria, eating the sandwich her mother had packed so carefully when Tyler approached with his group. "Look who's joined our school," he said, loud enough for other students to hear. "At least this time they sent one who takes a bath." Ethan laughed loudly, egging his friend on. "That's right, Tyler, but does she even know how to read? Or did she just come here to mess up our class?" Zoe swallowed the bite of bread she'd been chewing, feeling the lump form in her throat. This wasn't the first time she'd faced this kind of situation. At her old school, some classmates had made comments too, but never so directly or cruelly. She looked around, searching for an adult who might step in, but the PE teacher was on the other side of the yard, busy with a group of girls playing jump rope. "I do know how to read," she replied, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. "And I know exactly why I'm here, to study, just like you." Tyler laughed again, this time more mockingly. "Just like us? You live in Rosedale Heights, don't you? My mom always says that place is full of different people." The word different carried a prejudice Zoe recognized immediately. It was the same tone she'd heard from some people on the bus, the same look she got when she went to the supermarket in the more central neighborhoods with her mother. "Different how?" she asked, standing up from the bench. Even though she was younger than the 2 boys, Zoe had a presence that unsettled them. There was something in her dark, piercing eyes that conveyed intelligence and determination. Ethan stepped forward, clearly trying to intimidate her. "Different like poor, fatherless, no dad." "I have a dad," Zoe interrupted, though even to her own ears the statement sounded weak. "Sure you do," Tyler sneered. "Everyone has a dad. The question is where he is, right?" Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing, the bell for class rang at that moment, saving Zoe from having to respond. She grabbed her backpack and walked toward the classroom, feeling the curious stares of other students who had witnessed the scene. Her white shirt now seemed less impeccable, not because it was dirty, but because the sparkle in her eyes had dimmed slightly. Inside the classroom, their teacher, Margaret Peterson, a 52-year-old woman who had been teaching for over 2 decades, began the math lesson. Zoe had always excelled with numbers, a skill she discovered very young when helping her mother count change from groceries and calculate how much of the paycheck was left for basic needs. "Let's do a partner activity," announced the teacher. "I want you to solve the problems on page 47 together." Immediately, the students started pairing up. Tyler and Ethan teamed up automatically, as did the girls who had already formed their little cliques since the beginning of the year. Zoe remained seated, waiting for someone to invite her or for the teacher to assign partners. "Zoe, you can pair up with Olivia," said Mrs. Peterson, pointing to a shy girl who also hadn't found a partner. Olivia Baker was a 10-year-old girl, the daughter of a seamstress who worked from home. She was known for being extremely quiet and struggling with math. When she sat next to Zoe, her first words were an apology. "Sorry, I'm not good with numbers. You'll have to do everything yourself." "It's okay," Zoe replied with a genuine smile. "We can do it together. I'll explain and you can help me with other subjects." As the two girls worked, Zoe showed remarkable patience for her age, explaining each step of the calculations, clearly and simply. Olivia, in turn, began to feel more confident and realized she understood better than she'd thought. Across the room, Tyler watched the pair with growing irritation. He'd noticed how quickly Zoe solved the problems. Much faster than he could, and it bothered him deeply. Ethan had noticed too and whispered something in his friend's ear that made him smirk. "Mrs. Peterson," Tyler called, raising his hand. "Zoe's doing the exercises for Olivia. That's not fair." Mrs. Peterson walked over to the two girls and observed their work. In truth, she could clearly see Olivia actively participating, asking questions and writing down her own calculations. "They're working together properly, Tyler. Get back to your activity." But the comment had already planted a seed of doubt in the classroom. Some students began eyeing Zoe suspiciously, as if she were trying to show off. For the first time since arriving at the school, Zoe wondered if her mother had made the right decision transferring her. After class, in the hallway leading to the school gate, Tyler and Ethan caught up with Zoe again. This time they were joined by two other boys, Jacob Miller, the son of a local shop owner, and Caleb Harris, whose father was a supervisor at a shoe factory. "Hey, smarty," Tyler said, blocking Zoe's path. "Trying to impress the teacher, huh?" "I was just helping Olivia," she replied, trying to step around the group. "Sure you were," Ethan said sarcastically. "Bet you think you're better than us just 'cause you can do math." Jacob, a chubby 10-year-old boy who always followed the group leaders, decided to join in on the teasing. "My mom said people from your neighborhood only come to this school for the free lunch. Is it true you don't have food at home?" The question hit Zoe like a punch to the gut. It was true that sometimes things were tight at home, that there were nights when she and her mom ate only rice and eggs, because money was scarce. But that didn't mean she didn't deserve to be there, that she wasn't as capable as any of them. "I deserve to be at this school just as much as you do," she said, lifting her chin defiantly. "Oh, really?" taunted Caleb, a skinny boy with dark hair who rarely spoke, but always had something sharp to say when he did. "Who told you that, your absent father?" This time Zoe couldn't hold back the tears welling in her eyes. She pushed past the boys, shoving Jacob harder than she meant to, and ran toward the gate where her mom was waiting. Denise Thompson was a 34-year-old woman, thin but strong, her hands calloused from hard work and her eyes tired from endless worries. When she saw her daughter approaching with tears streaming down her face, her heart clenched. "What happened, sweetheart?" she asked, crouching to Zoe's level. "Nothing, Mom. I just want to go home." Denise knew her daughter too well to believe it was nothing. During the bus ride to Rosedale Heights, she tried several times to get Zoe to open up, but the girl stayed silent, staring out the window at the passing streets. The Rosedale Heights neighborhood was a working-class community on the outskirts of Portland. The houses were modest, most of them bare brick or painted in colors that had faded over time. The streets were narrow, not all of them paved, but life thrived there, kids playing on the sidewalks, neighbors chatting on doorsteps, dogs napping in the shade of trees. The house where Zoe and Denise lived had 2 small bedrooms, a living room that doubled as a kitchen and a tiny bathroom. It was rented, and the cost ate up nearly half of Denise's paycheck, but it was clean, tidy, and filled with the kind of love only a mother could pour into a home. That evening, as Denise cooked dinner, rice, beans, and a piece of chicken she'd managed to buy on sale, she watched her daughter doing homework at the living room table. Zoe was quieter than usual, burying herself in her books as if she could hide between the pages. "Zoe," Denise called, turning off the stove and walking over. "You know you can talk to me about anything, right?" The girl looked up from her books and saw the worry on her mom's face. Denise had given up so many dreams to raise her daughter alone, worked hard every day, and still found the energy to help with homework and listen to all Zoe's stories about school. She didn't deserve more worry. Some kids were just being silly today, Zoe said, trying to sound casual. No big deal. What kind of silly? Oh, Mom, you know how boys are. They test the new kids. It'll pass. Denise wasn't entirely convinced, but she decided not to push it. She knew the challenges her daughter faced at a new school, especially one where most students came from better-off families, but she believed Zoe was strong enough to overcome anything. The next day, things got worse. During English class, Mrs. Margaret asked the students to read a passage aloud. When it was Zoe's turn, she stood up and began to read in a clear, confident voice, pronouncing each word perfectly and respecting the punctuation. "Very good, Zoe," praised the teacher. "You read very well. Where did you learn to read like that?" "My mom taught me before I started school," Zoe replied proudly. "She says reading is the door to all the places we want to know." It was true. Denise had taught her daughter to read at 4 years old, using old newspapers she got from work and a borrowed primer from a neighbor. She herself had only studied up to 5th grade, but she knew the importance of education and was determined to give her daughter every opportunity she hadn't had. The teacher's praise, however, only made Tyler and his group angrier. During recess, they approached Zoe with a different strategy. "Hey, Zoe," Ethan called in a falsely friendly tone. "You're really good at English. Bet you can read this word here." He held up a piece of paper with a word Zoe immediately recognized as inappropriate. It was a curse word she'd heard a few times on the street, but knew she shouldn't repeat. "I won't read that," she said, turning to walk away. "Oh, so you can't read everything," Tyler mocked. "I knew you were just showing off." "I can read," Zoe shot back. "I just won't read curse words." "Wow, what a saint," Caleb sneered. "Bet your mum taught you to be all proper like that. Or maybe she can't read either." This time, Zoe stopped and turned to face Caleb directly. "My mom can read, and she works harder in one day than you all will in a whole month." The response caught the boys off guard. For the first time, Zoe had fired back, and they could see that behind her small frame was a strength they hadn't expected. "Hold on," Jacob said, trying to sound threatening. "Who do you think you are, talking to us like that?" "I know exactly who I am," Zoe replied, surprising even herself with the steadiness in her voice. "And I know I don't need to put anyone down to feel important." The words hit the boys unexpectedly. For a moment, there was silence, as if they were processing what they'd just heard. But Tyler, feeling his leadership challenged, lashed out, more aggressively. "You'll see, you little show-off. No one tells us what to do here. This school isn't for people like you." "People like me what?" Zoe asked, stepping forward. "Poor people with no family who just come here to take advantage," Ethan shot back, repeating words he'd heard from his own parents at home. It was then that Olivia, who had been watching the whole argument from a distance, stepped closer to the group. The shy girl who had worked with Zoe the day before seemed to have found a courage she didn't know she had. "Leave her alone," Olivia said, her voice trembling but firm. "She didn't do anything to you." "Look at this," Tyler laughed, "the two little nobodies teaming up." "I'm not a nobody," Olivia retorted, lifting her chin. "And even if I were, that doesn't make you any better." The situation was getting too heated for the schoolyard. Other students began gathering, forming a circle around the group. Some were curious, others seemed eager for a fight, and a few looked genuinely concerned. That's when the gym teacher, Sarah Mitchell, a 45-year-old woman with a firm grip and sharp eyes, approached the group. "What's going on here?" she asked, looking straight at Tyler, whom she knew well from previous years. "Nothing, ma'am," he replied quickly. "We were just talking." "Talking?" Teacher Sarah looked at the tense faces of everyone involved. "Olivia, are you okay?" "Yes, teacher," the girl replied, her voice still shaky. "Zoe?" "I'm fine, teacher." Teacher Sarah knew the signs of conflict between students well. She had witnessed similar situations many times throughout her career and knew they were rarely resolved with just a momentary intervention. She made a mental note to speak with the principal about the situation and decided to disperse the group for now. "Recess is over. Everyone back to your classrooms." As the students headed inside, Zoe felt a mix of relief and worry. On one hand, she was proud of standing up for herself and seeing Olivia do the same. On the other, she knew this situation was far from over. During science class, taught by Mr. Robert Anderson, a young 28-year-old who had recently graduated and was in his first year of teaching, Zoe tried to focus on the lesson about the solar system. She had always been fascinated by astronomy, imagining what it would be like to travel to other planets and discover new worlds. "Can anyone tell me which planet is closest to the sun?" the teacher asked. Several hands went up, including Zoe's. Mr. Roberts scanned the room and chose her to answer. "Mercury," Zoe replied without hesitation. "Very good. And why is Mercury a difficult planet to live on?" Zoe thought for a moment before answering. "Because it's so close to the sun, so it must be really hot during the day. But since it doesn't have an atmosphere to trap heat, it must get very cold at night." Mr. Roberts smiled, impressed by her thorough and well-articulated answer. "Excellent reasoning, Zoe. Do you like astronomy?" "I love it, teacher. My mom bought me a used book about planets and I've read it over and over." "That's great. If you'd like, I can lend you some books from the school library on the subject." Zoe's eyes lit up at the possibility. New books about astronomy were a treasure she could hardly dream of having. But her joy was cut short when she heard Tyler whisper to Ethan, "Of course she likes books. It's the only thing poor people can do anyway." This time Zoe pretended she hadn't heard, but the words still stung. She began to wonder if her interests were really inappropriate for her age, if she should be playing with other things instead of reading about planets and stars. After class, Mr. Robert approached Zoe as she was packing up her things. "Zoe, are you really interested in science?" "Very much, teacher. How about participating in the school's science fair at the end of the semester? You could do a project on astronomy." The idea excited Zoe, but also worried her. A science fair would mean extra work, materials her mom might not be able to afford, and more attention in a school where she was already having trouble. "I'd love to, teacher, but would a project cost a lot?" Mr. Robert recognized the real concern behind her question. He himself came from a modest family and understood the financial limitations some students faced. "It doesn't have to be expensive, Zoe. We can make something creative with simple materials. What matters is the knowledge and creativity." "Then I'll do it," she said, feeling a surge of excitement. "Great, we'll talk more about it next class." When Zoe got home that afternoon, she was more excited than she'd been since her first day at the new school. She told her mum about the conversation with Mr. Robert and the chance to participate in the science fair. "I'm so proud of you." "Sweetheart," Denise exclaimed, hugging Zoe tightly. "You've always been so smart. I'm sure you'll come up with an amazing project." "But what if it's too expensive, Mum? What if I need things we can't afford?" Denise cupped her daughter's face in her hands, looking straight into her eyes. "My dear, if there's one thing I've learned in life, it's that intelligence and creativity are worth more than any money. We'll figure it out. We always have, haven't we?" That night, mother and daughter spent hours talking about planets, stars, and possible projects for the fair. Denise, even though she hadn't studied astronomy, asked thoughtful questions that helped Zoe organize her ideas. It was a moment of pure connection between them, a reminder that no matter the challenges they faced, they had each other. The next day, however, the situation at school took a different turn. During PE class, the students were divided into teams for a game of dodgeball. Teacher Sarah tried to mix the groups so everyone had a chance to play together, but Tyler immediately complained when he saw Zoe was on his team. "Teacher, she's going to make us lose," he protested. "I bet she doesn't even know how to play." "Tyler, everyone gets to play, and who knows, you might be surprised by your classmates' skills," the teacher replied firmly. The game began, and to everyone's surprise, Zoe proved to be quick and strategic. She dodged the opponent's throws multiple times and even eliminated 2 players from the other team. But instead of celebrating her skills, Tyler grew even, angrier. "Beginner's luck," he muttered when Zoe scored an important point for their team. The situation reached a breaking point near the end of the game when Zoe was in position to make the winning throw. She had the ball in hand, aiming at the last player on the opposing team, when Tyler, standing beside her, deliberately shoved her arm, making her miss. Oops, he said with a fake smile. Didn't mean to. Zoe looked at him with a mix of disbelief and anger. This time it wasn't just cruel words, it was deliberate sabotage. She felt a wave of indignation rise in her chest, but managed to keep her composure. "I know you did that on purpose," she said quietly enough that only Tyler could hear. "Prove it," he challenged, still wearing that mocking grin. Teacher Sarah, who had been watching the game closely, noticed the incident, but couldn't tell if it was intentional or accidental. She made a mental note to pay even closer attention to the students' interactions. After PE, as the students headed to the locker rooms, Ethan joined Tyler to talk about what had happened. "Did you see her face when you made her miss?" Ethan laughed. Looked like she was about to cry. "She better get used to it," Tyler replied. "I'm not going to let her think she's special just because the teachers encourage her." "Yeah. My mom says people like that always want to show off, that we got to put them in their place." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out as we're just starting. Now, continuing. Ethan's words echoed the prejudiced attitudes he'd learned at home, where discriminatory remarks were normalized in family conversations. Without realizing it, he was repeating the same patterns of behavior his parents displayed every day. Meanwhile, Zoe changed in the girls' locker room, trying to process what had happened. Olivia approached her, showing the growing solidarity between them. "Are you okay?" "I saw what Tyler did," Olivia whispered. "I am," replied Zoe, but her voice didn't sound convincing. "They're really mean. I don't understand why they do this." Zoe finished changing her clothes and turned to face Olivia. "You know what bothers me the most? It's not even what they do to me. It's seeing that this is normal for them. Like it's natural to treat people that way. You're right, but what can we do? They're popular, their parents have money." "I don't know yet," said Zoe with growing determination in her voice. "But there's got to be a way." During history class, the teacher, Catherine Morgan, a 55-year-old woman with vast experience in education, began talking about the colonial period in the United States. She had noticed tensions between some students and decided to address topics that could spark reflection on diversity and respect. "Can anyone tell me how colonial American society was structured?" she asked. Several students raised their hands, including Tyler, who always liked to show he knew the answers. "Tyler?" There were the British, who owned the land, the African slaves, who did the hard labor, and the Native Americans, who were already here, he answered. "Very good. And how do you think these different groups interacted?" This time, it was Zoe who raised her hand. "Ms. Morgan, I think the British believed they were superior to the others, right? That's why they enslaved Africans and took land from the Native Americans." "Excellent observation, Zoe. And do you think this kind of thinking still exists today?" The question created an uncomfortable silence in the room. Some students shifted in their seats, others glanced around, clearly unsure how to respond. "I think so," said Zoe after a few seconds. "Sometimes people still think they're better than others because of their skin color, or having more money or living in different places." Tyler squirmed in his seat, clearly bothered by the direction of the conversation. Ethan looked at him with an expression that suggested he was thinking the same thing. "Zoe is right," continued Ms. Morgan. "Unfortunately, some prejudices from the colonial period still exist in our society. That's why it's important to study history, to understand where these problems come from and how we can change them." "But Ms. Morgan," interrupted Caleb, "isn't it natural for different people to have different places in society?" The question surprised Ms. Morgan, who saw an important teaching opportunity. "Caleb, can you explain what you mean by natural?" "Oh, I don't know. My dad always says everyone has their place, that some people are born to lead and others to follow." "And do you agree with your dad?" Caleb visibly hesitated, realizing he'd revealed more than he intended. "I don't know. It's just what I've always heard." "I see. And you, Zoe? What do you think of Caleb's opinion?" Zoe took a deep breath before answering. She knew her response might cause more conflict with Tyler's group, but she also knew she couldn't stay silent. "I think no one is born to be inferior to anyone, Ms. Morgan. My mum always told me what makes a person special isn't where they're born or how much money they have, but how they treat others and the effort they make to be a good person. Very well said, Zoe. And the rest of you, do you agree? Olivia raised her hand timidly. I agree, Miss Morgan. I think everyone deserves respect, no matter what. A few other students murmured in agreement, but Tyler and his group stayed silent, clearly unhappy with how the discussion had gone. After class in the hallway, Tyler confronted Zoe more aggressively than before. Real clever, huh? Saying all that stuff in class to get the teacher on your side. I only said what I think, replied Zoe. Of course you did. You love playing the victim, don't you? Sitting there pretending you're discriminated against just to get attention. I'm not pretending anything, and you know very well it's true. Ethan joined the conversation, clearly siding with his friend. Listen here, Miss Know-It-All. You came here thinking you could change everything, talking about equality and all that nonsense, but this school has its rules and we're not letting you mess them up. What rules? Asked Zoe, genuinely curious. The rules that everyone sticks with their own kind, answered Tyler. You should be at a school in your neighborhood with people on your level. And what exactly is my level? You know exactly what it is. This time Zoe couldn't fully control her anger. She took a step forward, staring Tyler straight in the eye. I do know my level, and I can guarantee it's far above yours, because I've never needed to humiliate anyone to feel important. The response caught Tyler off guard. For the first time, he saw a strength in Zoe's eyes that intimidated him. It wasn't just anger. It was a deep conviction he couldn't understand. You're gonna regret talking to me like that, he said, trying to regain his authority. What are you gonna do? Intimidate me more? Call me names? Push me around? Zoe laughed, but there was no joy in it. You've already done all that. And you know what I've realized? Nothing you do makes me any less than I am. With those words, she turned and walked toward her next class, leaving Tyler and Ethan standing in the hallway, unsure how to react. That afternoon, when she got home, Zoe found her mother in the kitchen, making dinner and listening to the radio. Denise immediately noticed something different in her daughter's expression. How was your day? She asked, drying her hands on a dish towel. Interesting, Zoe replied, sitting at the table. We had a lesson on U.S. history that got me thinking. What did you study? Zoe told her about the discussion in history class, the teacher's questions, and her classmates' answers. Denise listened carefully, noticing how her daughter seemed to have matured years in just a few weeks. And what did you think about all that? Denise asked. I think some kids my age already talk just like their parents about these things. Like, it's normal to think some people are better than others, Denise sighed. She had faced plenty of prejudice in her own life and knew this conversation would come sooner or later. Honey, unfortunately, a lot of people really think that way, and sometimes they pass those thoughts to their kids without even realizing the harm they're doing. But why, Mom? Why is it so hard for some people to understand that everyone's equal? Because it's easier to feel superior to someone than to put in the effort to actually be a better person, Denise answered, with the wisdom of someone who had learned this through painful experience. The boys at my school, they think they're better than me because they live in bigger houses and their parents have more money. Denise's heart ached. She knew this day would come, but it still hurt to see her daughter facing the same kind of prejudice she knew all too well. And what do you think about that? She asked. I think they're wrong, really wrong, but I also think they don't know they're wrong. It's like no one ever explained to them that this isn't right. Zoe's observation surprised Denise. At 10 years old, her daughter was showing emotional maturity and insight that many adults lacked. And what do you plan to do with that knowledge? Denise asked, curious to hear the answer. I don't know yet, but I think just fighting with them won't solve anything. They'll keep thinking the same way. You're right. Fighting rarely changes people's minds. So how do we change them? Denise thought for a moment before answering. By showing a different way of being, my dear. Sometimes people only change when they see something better than what they know. That night, Zoe stayed awake for a long time, thinking about her mother's words. She began mentally forming a plan, still vague and uncertain, but growing in her mind. It wasn't a plan for revenge or retaliation, but something entirely different. The next day during recess, Zoe approached a few students who were usually alone or ignored by the more popular groups. There was Madison Cooper, a 9-year-old girl who was great at drawing but extremely shy. Nathan Carter, a 10-year-old boy who struggled with learning but was kind to everyone, and Abigail Wilson, an 11-year-old girl who had repeated a grade and felt out of place among the younger classmates. "Hey guys," Zoe said, walking up to them. "Can I sit with you?" The three exchanged surprised glances. Zoe had become well known at school, both for her high grades and her conflicts. With Tyler and his group, for them it was a surprise she wanted to join them. "Sure," Madison replied shyly. "But why aren't you with Olivia?" "Olivia is helping Mrs. Margaret with some materials, and I actually wanted to get to know you all better." Nathan smiled. He was used to being ignored by his classmates and was genuinely happy about Zoe's interest. "You're the girl who knows all the answers in class, right?" he asked. "I like studying," Zoe replied. "But I bet you all know plenty of interesting things too." Abigail let out a bitter laugh. "I know what it's like to fail a grade and be called stupid by the other kids." "That doesn't make you stupid," Zoe said firmly. "Sometimes people just need more time or different ways to learn." "Easy for you to say when you're smart," Abigail shot back, but without hostility. "Look, I might be good at some subjects, but I bet you're good at things I can't even do, like those amazing drawings I've seen you do sometimes." Abigail was surprised. She didn't know anyone had noticed her drawings. "You've seen my drawings?" "Yeah, they're really beautiful. I can't even draw a house right." Madison, who had stayed quiet, joined the conversation. "Abigail, your drawings really are great. I like drawing too, but I'm not as good as you." "You draw too, Madison?" Zoe asked, genuinely interested. Madison nodded shyly and pulled a small notebook from her backpack. The pages were filled with delicate sketches of flowers, animals, and landscapes. "Wow, Madison, these are gorgeous," Zoe exclaimed. "You two are so talented." Nathan felt a little left out of the drawing talk. "I can't draw at all," he said, sounding a bit sad. "But you must be good at other things," Zoe said. "What do you like to do?" "I like taking care of animals. I have 3 cats and a dog at home. My mum says I have a way with them." "That's so cool. I've always wanted a pet, but my building doesn't allow them. How do you take care of them?" Nathan's eyes lit up as he started talking about his animals. He explained the care they needed, how each had a unique personality, and how he had learned to recognize when they were sick or needed special attention. "You know so much about animals," Zoe said, impressed. "I bet you could be a vet when you grow up." "You think so?" asked Nathan with a hope he rarely showed. "Of course. You have knowledge and care for animals. Those are the 2 most important things." As the 4 of them talked, Tyler and Ethan watched from a distance, clearly bothered by what they saw. "Look at that," said Tyler with disdain. "Now she's hanging out with the school losers." "At least now she's in her place," replied Ethan. "No, you don't get it. She's trying to form a little group. I can't let that happen." "Why? What's the big deal?" "Because if they team up, they'll start thinking they're important, and then they'll want to compete with us." Ethan didn't fully understand his friend's logic, but he was used to following his lead. "So, what do you want to do?" "I'll show them that losers belong alone, not together," said Tyler with a cruel smile. During art class taught by Ms. Patricia Brown, a creative 40-year-old woman who always encouraged her students' self-expression, they were asked to draw freely on the theme of friendship. Zoe decided to draw 4 different kids, each with a special skill, working together to tend a garden. Even though she wasn't the best artist in class, she put a lot of care and intention into every stroke. Madison, sitting beside her, drew 2 girls sharing a book under a tree. Abigail created a more elaborate drawing of kids of different ages playing together in a park. Nathan drew children taking care of various animals on a farm. When Ms. Brown walked around to see their work, she lingered longer on the group of 4. "How interesting," she said. "You all drew about friendship, but each from a different perspective." "Zoe, can you explain your drawing?" "I drew different kids working together. Each one has something they're good at, and when they team up, they can do even better things." "And you girls?" the teacher asked Madison and Abigail. I drew two friends sharing knowledge, said Madison shyly. And I drew kids of different ages being friends because I think age doesn't matter in true friendship, explained Abigail. Nathan, I drew kids taking care of animals together because I think when you care for something as a team, friendship grows stronger. Ms. Brown smiled, clearly impressed by the depth of their answers. You've made very thoughtful observations about friendship. May I show these drawings to the class? The four exchanged glances and agreed. When the teacher displayed their work to the whole room, explaining the ideas behind each one, Zoe noticed some classmates looking at them with genuine interest. But she also saw Tyler and Ethan whispering to each other, clearly plotting something. After class, in the hallway, Tyler approached Nathan, who was alone, packing his bag. "Hey, Nathan," he called in a falsely friendly tone. "Need to talk to you." Nathan looked up, surprised. Tyler rarely spoke to him, and when he did, it was usually to mock him. "What is it?" Nathan asked warily. "It's about your new little friends. You know they're only being nice to you because they need people to form their little group, right? I don't get it. Zoe's trying to form a clique to compete with us. She doesn't actually care about you. She's just using you and the other girls." Nathan was confused. His conversation with Zoe had seemed genuine, but now Tyler was planting seeds of doubt in his mind. "You really think so? I'm sure of it. Bet if you stop hanging out with them, she won't even care. She just wants the numbers." "What numbers?" "The more people she has in her group, the more important she can feel. But you're just pieces to her." Ethan Johnson stepped closer at that moment, backing up his friend's words. "It's true, Nathan. Girls like her always do this. They pretend to care, but at the first chance, they'll drop you." Nathan was starting to feel unsure. He'd been so happy at the possibility of having real friends that maybe he hadn't noticed signs of fakeness. "What do you think I should do?" he asked, genuinely confused. "Simple," said Tyler. "Stop hanging out with them and see if they come after you. If they really cared, they'd try to win you back, right?" The logic made sense to Nathan, who didn't have much experience with real friendships. "Okay," he said reluctantly. "I'll try." Tyler and Ethan walked away, satisfied with the results of their manipulation. They'd learned that sometimes it was more effective to break groups from within than to attack them directly. The next day, Zoe, Madison, and Abigail were surprised when Nathan didn't join them at recess. He was sitting alone on another bench, avoiding looking their way. "What's going on with Nathan?" asked Madison. "I don't know," replied Zoe. "I'll talk to him." When she approached Nathan, Zoe could tell he was clearly uncomfortable. "Hi, Nathan. Everything okay? You seem a little off. Today?" "I'm fine," he answered without looking up. "Don't you want to sit with us today?" "No, thanks. I'd rather be alone." Zoe sensed something was wrong, but didn't want to push. "Okay, but if you want to talk about anything, we'll be right over there, all right?" Nathan just nodded, and Zoe returned to where Madison and Abigail were waiting. "Well?" asked Abigail. "He said he'd rather be alone today. Must be something going on at home or something." The three stayed together during recess, but they all missed Nathan's cheerful presence. Unbeknownst to them, Tyler was watching from a distance, pleased to see his plan had worked. During math class, Mrs. Peterson suggested a group activity, 4 students working together to solve complex problems. Naturally, Zoe, Madison, and Abigail teamed up and looked for Nathan to complete their group. "Nathan, want to join us?" called Zoe. Nathan hesitated, remembering Tyler's words about being used just for numbers. He decided to test if the offer was genuine. "I'm not great at math. Don't you want someone better in the group?" "Of course not," Abigail replied right away. "We can help each other. I struggle with some things too. And I can explain the parts I understand," added Zoe. "That way we all learn together." The response threw Nathan off. If they were really just using him to fill the group, they wouldn't insist on including him knowing his struggles. He started to think maybe Tyler was wrong. "Okay," he said, still hesitant. "But if I slow you down, just tell me." "You won't," Madison said with a kind smile. "We're in this together." During the activity, the group worked exactly as Zoe had suggested. She patiently explained the trickier concepts. Abigail shared alternative methods she'd learned when she repeated a grade. Madison organized the information visually, and Nathan asked questions that helped everyone understand the problems better. By the end, they'd solved all the exercises correctly, and more importantly, they'd all learned something new. "Thanks, guys," Nathan said, genuinely grateful. "I learned a lot today." "We should be thanking you," Zoe replied. "Your questions helped me understand some things better too." At that moment, Nathan realized he had been deceived by Tyler. The concern and kindness he saw in his new friend's eyes were real, and he felt bad for doubting them. After class, he approached Zoe. "Zoe, can I talk to you for a minute?" "Of course, Nathan, what is it?" "I wanted to apologize for how I acted yesterday. Tyler and Ethan told me some things about you, and I ended up believing them." Zoe wasn't surprised. She had suspected the two boys would try to sabotage the friendship she was building. "What did they say?" "That you were only being nice to me to form a group and compete with them, that you didn't really care about me." "And you believed them?" Nathan lowered his head, ashamed. "At first, yes. I'm not used to people being nice to me without wanting something in return." Zoe's heart ached hearing that. She realized Nathan had faced disappointments in the past that made him distrust genuine kindness. "Nathan, I understand why you were afraid, but I want you to know something. I like you for who you are, not because I need you for anything, but because you're a good and interesting person." "Really? Really? And the girls feel the same way?" Nathan smiled, feeling immense relief. "Thank you for not giving up on me." "True friends don't give up on each other," Zoe said. "But now I know we have to be careful. Tyler and Ethan will try to drive us apart again." "What can we do?" "Let's talk to Madison and Abigail. If we know they'll try to manipulate us, it'll be harder for them to succeed." During lunch, the four of them gathered in a quieter corner of the cafeteria. Zoe told them about her conversation with Nathan and the tactics Tyler and Ethan were using. "That's really low," Abigail said, indignant. "They can't attack us directly, so they try to tear us apart from the inside." "And they almost succeeded," Nathan admitted. "If I hadn't joined the math activity today, I might never have realized the truth." "The important thing is that you did," Madison said. "Now we know we have to stay alert." "But don't you think this is too much work?" Abigail asked. "I mean, always having to defend ourselves, always having to prove our friendship is real?" It was a valid question, and Zoe thought carefully before answering. "I think it's worth it, because what we have is special. Each of us has something good to offer, and together we're stronger." "Zoe's right," Nathan agreed. "I've never felt so accepted anywhere else." "Me neither," Madison said softly. "I always thought I was too shy to have real friends. And I thought because I repeated a grade, no one would want to be my friend," Abigail added. At that moment, the four of them felt something special growing between them. It wasn't just a circumstantial friendship, but a real connection based on mutual acceptance and genuine support. Across the cafeteria, Tyler watched, the group with growing irritation. His attempt to separate Nathan from the girls had failed, and now they seemed even closer. "This isn't working," he said to Ethan. "They're becoming a bigger problem. What do you want to do now? I'll talk to my dad. He knows important people at the school. Maybe it's time for a more direct approach." That afternoon, Tyler arrived home and sought out his father, Richard Williams, a 42-year-old man who owned 3 bakeries in the area and considered himself an influential figure in the local community. Richard was in his office reviewing the month's numbers. "Dad, I need to talk to you about something at school." "What is it, son? Trouble with your grades?" "No, Dad. It's about a new girl at school. She's causing problems." Richard stopped looking at his papers and gave his son his full attention. "What kind of problems?" "She keeps talking about equality and stuff like that in front of everyone. And she's gathering the weaker students to form a group against the top students." "What do you mean, against the top students?" "She's trying to change the natural order of the school, Dad. Making teachers think everyone is equal when we know that's not how it works." Richard grew interested in the conversation. He himself had strong opinions about social order and believed some people were born to lead while others were born to follow. "And what specific problem is she causing for you?" "She's making the teachers pay more attention to her and her little group, and she's spreading wrong ideas about our family." "What ideas?" Tyler hesitated for a moment, realizing he needed to be careful with his words. She makes it seem like we think we're better than others just because we have more money. But that's not it, right, Dad? We just recognize that some people are more important than others. Richard nodded, pleased with his son's answer. You're right, Tyler. Some people really are born with more potential, better families, better opportunities, and it's natural for those people to have different positions in society. Exactly. But she's confusing the other kids. What's her name? Zoe Thompson. She lives in Rosedale Heights. Richard knew the neighborhood and immediately formed an impression of the kind of family Zoe came from. I see, and what do you want me to do? Don't you know the school principal? Maybe you could talk to her about this girl's behavior. Richard thought for a moment. He did know Principal Victoria Thompson and had done a few favors for the school, including donating bread for events and sponsoring small projects. I'll talk to Principal Victoria tomorrow. I'll explain that you and other students are being bothered by inappropriate behavior. Thanks, Dad. I knew you'd understand. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out as we're just starting. Now, continuing. The next day, Richard Williams scheduled a meeting with Principal Victoria Thompson. Mrs. Victoria was a 58-year-old woman who had been running John Dewey Elementary School for over 10 years. She knew the political dynamics of the municipal education department well and understood the importance of maintaining good relationships with the most influential families in the community. Richard, it's good to see you, she said, welcoming him into her office. How's business? Good, Victoria, thank you. Actually, I came here to talk about my son, Tyler. Is there a problem? He's always been one of our top students. It's not about him specifically. It's about a situation in his class that might be affecting the learning environment. Mrs. Victoria leaned forward, showing interest. Tell me what's going on. There's a new student recently transferred who's causing divisions in the class. According to Tyler, she keeps making speeches about social equality that are creating tension among the students. Speeches about social equality? How so? You know how it is, Victoria. Some kids come here with the wrong ideas about how society works, and when they spread those ideas, they can confuse other kids and create discipline problems. Mrs. Victoria was well familiar with Richard Williams's way of thinking. She knew he came from a traditional family in town and had always shown conservative views on social issues. What's the student's name? Zoe Thompson. She came from Rosedale Heights. Mrs. Victoria immediately remembered the girl. She had been the one to approve the transfer herself after much insistence from the mother. She also recalled hearing positive comments from teachers about Zoe's academic performance. Richard, as far as I know, Zoe is an excellent student. The teachers only speak well of her. Oh, Victoria, I'm not questioning her intelligence. The problem is her attitude. Tyler told me she keeps challenging other students, forming opposition groups, causing unnecessary conflicts. Conflicts? I haven't received any formal complaints about that. You know how it is. Teachers sometimes don't notice these tensions between students, but the kids feel it, and when the environment gets tense, it affects everyone's learning. Mrs. Victoria was in a delicate position. On one hand, she hadn't received any formal complaints about Zoe. On the other, Richard Williams was an important figure in the community, and maintaining a good relationship with him was crucial for the school's operation. What do you suggest I do? Maybe a talk with her and her mother. Make it clear that behaviors causing division among students aren't accepted here. Sometimes firm guidance early on prevents bigger problems later. I see your point, Richard. I'll look into the situation and, if necessary, take appropriate measures. Thank you, Victoria. I knew I could count on your good judgment. We want all students to succeed here, but without causing unnecessary problems for others. After Richard left, Mrs. Victoria grew thoughtful. She decided to discreetly speak with some teachers to better understand the situation before making any decisions. Her first conversation was with Mrs. Margaret. Margaret, how is Zoe Thompson's behavior in your class? Zoe, she's exemplary, Victoria, one of the best students I've ever had. Why do you ask? I received a comment about possible conflicts between her and other students. Have you noticed anything? Mrs. Margaret thought carefully before answering. Now that you mention it, I did notice some tension during yesterday's class. But Zoe wasn't causing problems. It was the opposite. She was responding to taunts from other students. Taunts? What kind? Prejudiced comments about her coming from Rosedale Heights, about her family's financial situation. Things like that. And who was making these comments? Mostly Tyler Williams and Ethan Johnson. Mrs. Victoria began to understand the situation better. The version Richard had told seemed quite distorted from reality. How did Zoe react to these taunts? With a lot of maturity, actually. She defended herself, but always respectfully and intelligently. I'd say she showed more class than the boys provoking her. I see, thank you, Margaret. Mrs. Victoria decided to speak with other teachers as well. Mr. Robert confirmed Mrs. Margaret's version, praising both Zoe's academic performance and behavior. Mrs. Catherine recounted the discussion about colonial history and how Zoe had contributed positively to an important reflection on prejudice. It was becoming clear to Mrs. Victoria that the situation wasn't as Richard had described. Zoe wasn't causing problems, she was the victim of prejudice from other students. However, Mrs. Victoria also knew she couldn't simply ignore Richard's pressure. He was an influential figure, and confronting him directly could create problems for the school. She decided to adopt a careful strategy. She would call everyone involved for a conversation, but in a way that protected Zoe while calming Richard. On Thursday morning, Zoe was called to the principal's office during recess. She had no idea what had happened and felt nervous as she entered Mrs. Victoria's office. "Sit here, Zoe. Don't worry, you haven't done anything wrong." The girl sat in the chair across from the principal's desk, her legs swinging nervously. "Zoe, I'd like to talk to you about how you're adjusting to our school. I really like it here, Principal. The teachers are very good." "That's wonderful to hear. And how are things with the other students?" Zoe hesitated. She didn't want to cause trouble for anyone, but she also didn't want to lie. "Most of the kids are nice. I've made some really good friends. Is there anyone who isn't so nice?" "Some boys sometimes make jokes that aren't very nice." "What kind of jokes?" "They talk about where I live, about my family and things like that." Mrs. Victoria nodded, confirming what she had heard from the teachers. "And how do you respond when they make those jokes?" "I try to explain that it's not right, that it's not fair to judge people based on where they live or how much money they have." "Do you think your explanations are working?" Zoe thought honestly before answering. "Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Some kids seem to understand when we talk about it, others just get angrier." "Zoe, you're a very smart girl, and I can see you have well-formed opinions about fairness and equality. That's admirable. Thank you, Principal. But I also want you to understand something important. Sometimes, even when we're right about something, we need to be strategic about how we express our opinions." Zoe didn't fully grasp what the principal was trying to say. "What do you mean, Principal?" "Well, you can keep standing up for your beliefs, but maybe it's better to do it in a more subtle way. Instead of confronting classmates who think differently, how about showing your opinions through your actions?" "I think I already do that, Principal." "Yes, you do, and I want you to keep doing it. I'm just suggesting that when conflicts arise, you try to resolve them more quietly. Do you understand?" Zoe was starting to realize that someone had complained about her to the principal and that she was being advised to be less vocal about social justice issues. "Principal, can I ask who complained about me?" Mrs. Victoria sighed. The question was fair but difficult to answer. "Zoe, it wasn't exactly a complaint. It was more of a concern about the classroom environment. Some people think discussions about social equality can be complicated for kids your age. But Mrs. Catherine said it was important to talk about these things in history class. And she's right. Academic discussions about these topics are important. The issue is when those discussions turn into personal conflicts between students." Zoe was beginning to feel deep frustration. She was being scolded for standing up against prejudice and expressing her beliefs about equality. "Principal, I can't stay quiet when other kids say wrong things about me or my family. And you don't have to stay quiet, Zoe. I'm just asking you to think about the best way to respond. Sometimes a smart, calm answer is more effective than an emotional one. I always try to be calm and respectful. I know you do, and the teachers speak very highly of you. This is just guidance to keep things from getting more complicated, understand? Zoe nodded, but inside she was drawing her own conclusions about the situation. She was realizing that even in a school, there were political and social pressures that protected some students more than others. Can I go now, Principal? Yes, you may. And Zoe, keep being the excellent student you are. Just remember what we talked about, okay? Okay, Principal. When Zoe left the principal's office, she was more determined than ever. Her conversation with Mrs. Victoria had made it clear that official channels wouldn't be enough to solve the problem she was facing. She needed a different approach. At lunch, she told Madison, Abigail, and Nathan about her talk with the principal. "This is so unfair," Abigail said, outraged. "You're being punished for standing up for yourself. And the worst part is they didn't. I even called Tyler and Ethan in to talk," Nathan added. "Maybe they did," Madison said, always trying to see the bright side. "No, Madison," Zoe said firmly. "If they had, they'd be furious with me right now. But they don't even know I was called to the principal's office." "So what do we do?" Nathan asked. Zoe looked at her three friends and felt determination growing inside her. "We're going to show the whole school there's a better way to treat people, but not through arguments or confrontations." "How?" Abigail asked. "I'm still figuring it out, but I have an idea starting to take shape." That afternoon at home, Zoe told her mother about her talk with the principal. Denise listened carefully, her expression growing more serious. "Sweetheart, this isn't right. You didn't do anything wrong." "I know, Mum, but I also realized something important today." "What did you realize?" "That fighting the system won't help. We have to find a way to change things from within." Denise looked at her daughter with a mix of pride and concern. At 10 years old, Zoe was showing a political and social maturity that was impressive, but also worrying, knowing the challenges it would bring. "And what do you plan to do?" "I'm not sure yet, but I know it has to do with setting a different example, with proving that when people work together, respecting each other's differences, everyone wins." "That sounds beautiful, sweetheart. But how will you make it happen?" "Remember the science project Mr. Robert invited me to work on?" "I do." "I'm thinking of making it bigger, something that involves not just astronomy, but people too. Something that shows how different elements can work together to create something amazing." Denise smiled. She could see the gears turning in her daughter's mind, forming a plan that was still taking shape. "Do you want help brainstorming this project?" "Yes, Mom, but first, I need to talk to my friends, and maybe some teachers I trust." That night, Zoe stayed up late, staring out her bedroom window at the stars. She was starting to understand that her situation at school wasn't just about kids bullying each other. It was a reflection of bigger problems in society, problems that wouldn't be solved with just a talk or a scolding. But she was also discovering something about herself. She wasn't just a victim of these situations. She had intelligence, creativity, and, most importantly, true friends who believed in her. Together, they could do something no one expected. The project forming in her mind wasn't about revenge against Tyler and Ethan. It was something much more ambitious and constructive, a practical demonstration of how diversity and cooperation could create extraordinary results. On Friday, during the science class, Zoe approached Mr. Robert after his lesson. "Mr. Robert, can I talk to you about the science fair project?" "Of course, Zoe. Have you thought of something specific?" "Yes, I have, but it's a little different from what you might be expecting." Professor Robert was immediately intrigued. He liked students who thought outside the box. "Tell me about your idea." "I'd like to do a project about how different elements work together in the universe, like how stars need planets, how planets need moons, how everything is connected." "Interesting. And how do you plan to demonstrate that?" "I was thinking of creating a presentation where different people represent different parts of the solar system. Each person would explain their role and how they connect to the others." Professor Robert was fascinated by the collaborative approach of the proposal. "Have you thought about who would participate?" Yes, me, Madison, Abigail, and Nathan. Each of us would study a different aspect, and then we'd combine everything into one big presentation. But Zoe, science fair projects are usually individual. I know, Professor, but I think when people work together, the result is much better than when each person works alone. And that's part of my scientific hypothesis too. Professor Robert smiled. He wasn't just seeing a science project. He was witnessing a life lesson being shaped by a 10-year-old girl. Explain this scientific hypothesis a little more. Well, in the universe, nothing works alone, right? The sun needs planets. Now to form a system. Planets need moons for stability. Stars need each other to form galaxies. My hypothesis is that the same goes for people. And how do you plan to prove that? By showing that when different people work together, using each other's special skills, they can create something none of them could do alone. Professor Robert was impressed by the depth of the proposal. He realized Zoe was trying to create something far beyond a simple school project. Zoe, that's a beautiful and clever idea, but are you sure you can organize all this? Yes, Professor. Madison is great at drawing and can create the visuals. Abigail is creative and can help with the artistic side. Nathan understands how things work in nature and can explain the connections, and I can handle the scientific part and the presentations. Do you think the school will accept a group project? I don't know, Professor. But if the result is good, I think they'll have to accept it. Professor Robert thought for a moment. He knew Zoe's proposal might face resistance from the school administration, especially after the conversation Mrs. Victoria had with Richard Williams. But he also knew innovative projects sometimes had to break a few rules to prove their worth. All right, Zoe, I'll support your project, but you'll have to work hard to make it perfect. We will, Professor, thank you so much. Just one thing. You'll need constant guidance. Can I suggest you talk to other teachers too? Mrs. Catherine could help with the historical part, Mrs. Margaret with organization, Mrs. Patricia with visuals. Zoe's eyes lit up at the possibilities. That would be amazing, Professor. Do you think they'd agree to help? I think so, especially if you explain the project well and show you're serious about it. During recess, Zoe gathered her friends to tell them about her talk with Professor Robert. The reaction was even better than she expected. I'd love to be part of it, Madison exclaimed. I can draw the planets, the stars, the orbits, and I can research how ancient people viewed the universe, said Abigail Wilson. Different cultures had different ideas about the stars. And I can explain how animals use the stars to navigate, added Nathan Carter. It's something that's always interested me. Perfect, said Zoe Thompson. Do you see how each of us has something special to contribute? That already proves our hypothesis. The group spent the rest of recess planning the details of their project. They decided they would meet at Zoe's house on Saturday to start their research. Across the yard, Tyler Williams watched the group with growing irritation. He had hoped his father's talk with the principal would result in some kind of punishment for Zoe, but she seemed more excited than ever. Ethan, he called, come here. What's up? Look at Zoe over there. She doesn't seem bothered at all by what happened. What happened? My dad talked to the principal about her. They should have given her a serious warning. So what if they did? If they did, it didn't do any good. Look how happy she is planning something with her little friends. Ethan watched the group of 4 kids chatting enthusiastically. What do you think they're planning? I don't know, but it can't be good. We need to find out. Tyler decided to try a more direct approach. He walked up to Zoe's group with a fake friendly smile. Hey guys, you all seem really excited. What are you planning? The 4 exchanged glances, clearly suspicious of Tyler's intentions. We're organizing a science project, Zoe replied, deciding to be honest. Cool, what's it about? About how different elements work together in the universe. Tyler laughed, but it sounded forced. Different elements working together? Isn't that a little childish for you? Why would it be childish? Asked Abigail. Because in the real world things don't work like that. Everyone has their place, and it's better when everyone stays in their place. Nathan bristled at the comment. But that's not true. In nature, animals work together all the time. Bees, ants, wolves. Oh, really? Tyler mocked. And you think people are like animals? I think people can learn from nature, Nathan shot back, refusing to back down. How sweet, Tyler said sarcastically. I bet you'll make a very educational presentation." Madison, who rarely spoke up in conflicts, surprised everyone when she said, "We will, and maybe you'll learn something by watching." The response caught Tyler off guard. He hadn't expected the shy Madison to challenge him. "I doubt you can teach anyone anything," he snapped, losing his composure. "Why do you doubt it?" Zoe asked, genuinely curious. "Because you're just—" Tyler hesitated, realizing he was about to say something problematic. "Because you're just kids." "You're just a kid too," Abigail pointed out. "It's different." "Why is it different?" Tyler grew increasingly uncomfortable with the direct questions. He had hoped his teasing would discourage the group, but the opposite was happening. "Forget it," he muttered, annoyed. "Do your project, just don't expect anyone to be impressed." After Tyler walked away, the group was quiet for a moment. "Did you notice?" Zoe finally said. "What?" asked Nathan. "He couldn't explain why he thought we were different. Every time we asked why, he had no answer." "It's true," Madison said. "It's like he knew he was wrong but couldn't admit it." "Maybe he doesn't even know why he thinks that way," Abigail suggested. "Maybe it's just something he learned at home." "You might be right," said Zoe thoughtfully. "And that gives me an idea about how our project could be even more important." On Saturday morning, the four friends gathered at Zoe's house. Denise had set up the living room table with research materials, books from the public library, old magazines she'd gotten from work, and some notepaper. "That's awesome, Mom. Thank you so much," said Zoe, hugging Denise. "You're welcome. Sweetheart, do you guys want a snack before you start?" "Yes, please," they all answered in unison. Denise made simple sandwiches and juice, and the four friends got to work while they ate. The atmosphere was full of genuine collaboration and excitement. "Where should we start?" asked Nathan. "I think each of us can research our part first, and then we'll put it all together," Zoe suggested. "Good idea," Abigail agreed. "I'll research how different cultures viewed the stars. I'll look into drawings and representations of the solar system," said Madison. "And I'll research how animals use the stars," said Nathan. "I'll organize the scientific part about how elements of the universe interact," said Zoe. They spent the whole morning researching, taking notes, and sharing interesting discoveries. Denise passed through the room several times and was impressed by how seriously and enthusiastically the kids were working. Around noon, Abigail made a discovery that excited the whole group. "Guys, listen to this," she said, reading from a book. "The ancient Greeks believed the stars were all connected by invisible lines, forming constellations that told stories. And every star was important to the story, even the smallest and dimmest ones." "That's amazing," Madison exclaimed. "That's exactly what we want to show." "It's true," Nathan agreed. "Every star had its role in the story, even if it was different from the others." Zoe smiled, seeing how the project was naturally developing in the direction she'd imagined. "And you know what else is cool?" she said. "Constellations only. Makes sense when you look at all the stars together. If you look at just one star at a time, there's no story." "Just like us," Madison said softly. "What do you mean?" Abigail asked. "Well, each of us alone is great, but when we work together, it becomes a more beautiful story." Madison's observation deeply touched all four of them. They realized they weren't just doing a school project, they were experiencing exactly what they wanted to demonstrate. "You know what we could do," Nathan suggested. "We could create our own constellation with each of us as a star." "How do you mean?" Zoe asked. "Well, Abigail researched constellation stories. Madison knows how to draw. I understand how animals navigate by the stars. And you understand the science behind it all. We could create a constellation that shows how different kinds of knowledge connect." The idea thrilled the whole group. They spent the rest of the afternoon developing the concept, making sketches, planning presentations, and most importantly, discovering how each individual skill contributed to a richer collective result. When Madison's, Abigail's, and Nathan's parents came to pick them up in the evening, they found four radiant kids surrounded by papers, books, and drawings. "How did the work go?" Madison's mom asked. "It was amazing, Mom," Madison replied, more excited than her mother had ever seen her. "We discovered so many cool things. And the best part, is that each of us found different things, Abigail added. When we put it all together, it became way more interesting than anything any of us could have done alone. The parents exchanged glances, impressed by their children's enthusiasm and articulation. Denise stepped closer and explained a bit about the project. They're creating a presentation about collaboration in the universe, she said, and from what I saw today, they're learning just as much as they're teaching. How lovely, said Nathan's father. Nathan, are you really enjoying working with the girls? Absolutely, Dad. They know things I've never even thought about, and I was able to help them too with what I know about animals. Abigail's mother, a woman who had been deeply worried about her daughter repeating a grade, was especially moved. Abigail, you seem so happy. I am, Mum. I realized that even though I repeated a year, I know a lot of important things, and my creativity helps others understand what they've researched even better. That evening, after their friends had left, Zoe helped her mother tidy up the house while sharing every detail of the project. Mum, today I understood something really important. What did you understand, sweetheart? That when we focus on what each person is good at, instead of what they lack, everyone becomes stronger. Denise stopped putting away the books and looked at her daughter. Explain that a little more. Well, Nathan always thought he wasn't smart because he struggles with math, but today he discovered he knows so much about nature and animals, things neither I nor the girls knew. Madison always thought being shy meant she had nothing important to contribute, but her drawings were key to helping us visualize our ideas. And Abigail always felt inferior for repeating a grade, but she's super creative and has a unique way of looking at things. Without her, our project would just be information. With her, it became art. Denise smiled, seeing how her daughter was learning valuable lessons about diversity and appreciating differences. And what about you, sweetheart? What did you discover about yourself? I realized that even though I love studying and organizing things, I need others to come up with truly interesting ideas. Alone, I'm just a girl who's good at math and science. With my friends, I can create things I never imagined possible. That night, Zoe fell asleep, feeling a confidence and joy she hadn't felt in weeks. She was discovering she had a power Tyler and Ethan didn't know about, the power to bring people together through their strengths. On Monday, when the group arrived at school, there was a different energy among them. Other students began noticing their excitement and grew curious about the project they were working on. During recess, Olivia Baker shyly approached the group. Hey guys, can I ask what you're working on? You all seem really excited. Of course, Zoe replied. We're working on a project about how different things work together in the universe. That sounds interesting. Is it for the science fair? Yes, we want to show that when different people collaborate, the result is better than when everyone works alone. Olivia thought for a moment. Do you think I could help with something? I'm not great at science, but of course you can help, Madison said immediately. What kind of things do you like to do? I like organizing things, and I like talking to people. Sometimes I help my mom with her sewing clients. Abigail brightened at the answer. That's perfect. We'll need someone to organize the presentation and maybe explain it to others. Really, you think I could do that? Of course you could, Nathan said. You're good at math, organized, and nice to everyone. Those are important qualities. Olivia smiled, clearly touched to be included and valued. So I can really join in? Yes, you can, said Zoe. But there's something you should know. We're doing this project to show something important about how people can treat each other better. Are you on board with that idea? Absolutely. I've always thought people could be nicer to one another. And just like that, the group of 4 became a group of 5. Olivia brought an organizational energy they didn't know they needed, and her natural ability to communicate with different kinds of people became essential to the project. During science class, Mr. Anderson asked about the project's progress. How's it going, everyone? Really well, Mr. Anderson, Zoe replied. And we had a new idea. Olivia's joining us too. Olivia, that's great. What will her role be? She'll help organize everything and present the project to others, Olivia explained, still a little shy but visibly excited. Interesting. And have you figured out how the presentation will go? We're still working on the details, said Abigail. But the idea is to show how each of us represents a different element in the universe, and how together we form a system that works better than separate parts. Mr. Anderson was impressed by the project's conceptual maturity. Would you like to present to the class before the science fair? It'd be a good way to test things out. The 5 exchanged glances, thrilled by the idea. We'd love to, Madison said. Great. How about next Friday? Perfect, Mr. Anderson. We'll be ready. On the other side of the room, Tyler watched the conversation with growing irritation. He had expected Zoe's group to lose momentum over time, but the opposite was happening. Now there were 5 of them. They seemed to be working on something important, and they had the teacher's full support. After class, he approached Ethan with a serious expression. This is getting out of hand. Why? What happened now? They're presenting their project to the whole class. If it goes well, they'll get even more popular. What's the big deal? Ethan, you don't get it. If they prove their way works, others will start questioning our way. Ethan still didn't see the problem the way Tyler did. What way of ours? The right way of doing things. Everyone in their place. Everyone with their own kind. If everyone starts mixing like they're doing, it'll turn into chaos. You really think so? I'm sure of it. My dad always says when hierarchies break down, society falls apart. Ethan didn't fully understand the hierarchies Tyler was talking about, but he trusted his friend's judgment. So what do you want to do? I don't know yet, but I can't just let them present this project without doing anything. You're not thinking of sabotaging them, are you? It's not sabotage, it's protection. Protecting the natural order of things. Ethan felt uneasy about the tone of the conversation, but didn't know how to oppose his friend. At lunch, the group of 5 was so excited planning the presentation they barely ate. They had already decided each would represent a different element of the solar system and explain how their role connected with the others. Zoe, you should be the sun, Olivia suggested. Because you organized everything and brought everyone together. No, Olivia, this is all of ours. I can just be any planet. But it makes sense for you to be the sun, Madison insisted. You had the original idea. Fine, Zoe agreed, but only if you all understand that everyone is equally important. The sun without planets is just a lonely star in space. We get it, Abigail said. And I want to be Venus, the planet of creativity and beauty. I'll be Earth, Madison said, the planet where life happens through art and expression. I'll be Jupiter, said Nathan, the planet that protects others and understands natural cycles. And I can be Mercury, said Olivia, the planet of communication, carrying messages between all the others. The allegory was working perfectly, and each of them felt uniquely and importantly represented. And you know what's really cool, said Zoe. In the real solar system, every planet has its unique traits, but they all orbit together around the sun. No planet is better than another. Each has its role. Just like our friendship, said Madison with a smile. At that moment, they didn't realize it, but they were being watched by other students at school. Some were curious, others envious, and a few genuinely interested in understanding what made that group so special. Jacob Miller, the chubby boy who usually followed Tyler and Ethan, was sitting a few tables away, eating alone. His friends had decided to sit elsewhere that day, and he felt left out and sad. He couldn't help overhearing Zoe's lively group, and began wondering what it would be like to be part of something like that, where each person was valued for their unique qualities. Caleb Harris was also watching from a distance. He noticed how the group seemed genuinely happy and united, unlike Tyler's group, where there was always competition and a need to prove superiority. Even some girls from the more popular cliques were paying attention to the different dynamic this group of 5 had created. It was as if a seed of change had been planted at school, starting with a small group, but beginning to influence others too. On Wednesday during history class, Teacher Catherine decided to do an activity on cooperation among ancient civilizations. She had heard about Zoe's group project and wanted to create a curricular connection. Today, we'll talk about how different ancient civilizations collaborated with each other, she announced. Can anyone give me an example of cooperation between different peoples? Several hands went up, including Abigail's, who had researched ancient cultures extensively for the science project. Abigail, teacher, The Phoenicians were experts in navigation and trade, but they relied on other peoples for agriculture and natural resources, so they created trade networks where each group contributed what they did best. Excellent example, and what happened when they collaborated? Everyone became wealthier and more developed, Abigail replied. Each group kept its identity, but all benefited from each other's knowledge. Very good. Does anyone else have another example? Nathan raised his hand. Teacher, I read that different indigenous tribes in the United States shared knowledge about medicinal plants and hunting techniques. Each tribe knew different things, but when they came together, they could solve problems none could solve alone. Teacher Catherine smiled, seeing how the students were making important connections. Nathan, that's very insightful. Do you think this kind of collaboration still exists today? This time, it was Olivia who raised her hand, surprising everyone with her active participation. I think it does, teacher. For example, when different people work together in a company, or when countries collaborate to solve big problems like climate change. Perfect, Olivia. And do you think this collaboration always works well? Tyler decided to join the discussion, seizing the chance to express his worldview. Teacher, not always. Sometimes when very different cultures mix, it can cause problems. Everyone has their own way of doing things, and mixing them up can confuse everything. Interesting observation, Tyler. Does anyone agree or disagree with him? Zoe raised her hand, knowing she was opening herself up to another confrontation, but feeling confident after the last few days of working harmoniously with her group. I disagree, ma'am. I think the problems don't come from mixing different cultures, but when one culture thinks it's superior to others and tries to dominate instead of collaborate. Explain further, Zoe. Well, in the example Abigail gave, the Phoenicians didn't think they were better than other people. They recognized that every group had valuable knowledge. The problem happens when one group believes only their way is right and tries to force everyone else to follow it. The room fell silent for a few seconds. Zoe's response had struck a deep chord, and many students were reflecting on their own attitudes. Very well said, Zoe, said Mrs. Catherine. And what do the rest of you think? Does collaboration work better when there's mutual respect for differences? Several students murmured in agreement, but Tyler was visibly uncomfortable with the direction of the discussion. But ma'am, he said, trying to regain control of the conversation, not all ideas are equal. Some are better than others. If we accept any idea as valid, we can't make progress. That's true, Tyler. Not all ideas are equal. But how can we tell which ideas are better? By the people who had them, Tyler answered without thinking. How so? Tyler realized he had exposed himself more than intended, but it was too late to backtrack. Well, more educated people from better families usually have better ideas. An uneasy murmur spread through the room. Some students were shocked by the bluntness of Tyler's comment. Tyler, Mrs. Catherine said calmly, can you give historical examples that support this theory? Well, Tyler stammered, realizing he couldn't back up his claim with historical facts. Madison, who rarely participated in discussions, surprised everyone by raising her hand. Ma'am, can I give an example that contradicts what Tyler said? Of course, Madison. Samuel Langley, who invented the airplane, was the son of wealthy farmers. But the Wright brothers, who also invented a plane around the same time, were the sons of a pastor and worked in a bicycle shop. They all had important ideas no matter where they came from. The teacher smiled, impressed by Madison's preparation. Excellent example, Madison. Does anyone else have other examples? Now, several students wanted to contribute, bringing club inventors, artists, and thinkers who came from humble backgrounds but made significant contributions to humanity. Tyler was growing increasingly isolated in the discussion, and Ethan, sensing the situation, decided not to expose himself by defending his friend. What can we conclude from this discussion? Mrs. Catherine asked at the end of class. Zoe raised her hand again. That the best ideas and solutions usually come when different people collaborate, each contributing their unique perspective, no matter where they come from. Perfect, Zoe. And that leads us to our next study topic. How different cultures contributed to the formation of the United States. When class ended, Tyler left the room visibly upset. He had tried to defend his beliefs but ended up exposing himself as prejudiced in front of the whole class. Ethan caught up with him in the hallway. "Dude, you really dug yourself into a hole. Back there." "I know," Tyler muttered, "but I can't just let them spread those wrong ideas without saying anything." "What wrong ideas? What they said made sense." Tyler stopped and looked at Ethan in surprise. "Are you on their side now?" "It's not about sides, Tyler. It's just sometimes they make valid points." "Ethan, you're forgetting who you... Just where you come from. Your parents won't like it one bit if they find out you're agreeing with that kind of thinking." The subtle threat made Ethan back down immediately. "You're right. I'm sorry. It's just, sometimes it's confusing, you know." "Exactly. They're trying to confuse everyone. That's why I have to do something before it's too late." That afternoon, Tyler came home determined to step up his campaign against Zoe's group. He approached his father again, but this time with a different strategy. "Dad, remember that girl we talked about? Zoe?" "Yes, I do. How's the situation?" "It's gotten worse. Now she's formed a group and they're influencing other kids with their ideas." "What kind of influence?" "They keep saying, all people are equal, that it doesn't matter where you come from or who your parents are. And the other students are starting to believe them." Richard stopped reading the newspaper and gave his son his full attention. "This is more serious than I thought." "Yeah, Dad. And now they're going to do a presentation at school to spread these ideas to the whole class." "When is this presentation?" "On Friday." Richard thought for a moment. He knew he had to act fast to stop these dangerous ideas from spreading further in school. "Tyler, I'll talk to the principal again. This time I'll be clearer about the risks these activities pose." "Thank you, Dad. I knew I could count on you." On Thursday morning, Richard Williams was back in Principal Victoria's office, but this time his approach was more assertive. "Victoria, we need to talk about that student I mentioned before. The situation has gotten worse." "What do you mean, Richard?" "She organized a group of students to promote her ideas, and now they're going to do a presentation at school to influence other kids." "Richard, as far as I know, they're working on a science project. I don't see a problem with that." "Victoria, you don't understand. This isn't just any science project. It's a disguised way to spread political ideology to children." "Political ideology? How so?" "They keep talking about social equality, mixing people from different classes, questioning authority. This isn't scientific education, it's indoctrination." Mrs. Thompson was in an even tougher spot than before. On one hand, there was nothing objectively wrong with a project about collaboration. On the other, Richard's pressure was mounting, and she knew the consequences of opposing him. "What do you suggest I do? Cancel the presentation, or at least require them to review the content before presenting?" "Richard, that might be tricky. Mr. Anderson already approved the project." "Then talk to Mr. Anderson. Explain that projects with political themes aren't appropriate for their age." "All right, I'll speak with Mr. Anderson and see how we can resolve this." "Thank you, Victoria. I knew I could count on your good judgment." After Richard left, Mrs. Thompson sat deep in thought. She was being pressured to take action her conscience told her was wrong, but her political circumstances forced her to consider it. She decided to talk to Mr. Anderson first to better understand the project before making any drastic decisions. "Robert, could you come here for a moment?" Mr. Anderson walked into the principal's office, unaware of what awaited him. "Hi, Victoria, what's up?" "I want to talk about the science fair project you're supervising, the one with Zoe and her group." "Oh, it's an excellent project. They've been working with impressive seriousness and creativity. Explain to me exactly what the project is about." "They're demonstrating how different elements collaborate in the universe, using the solar system as an analogy to show how diversity and cooperation create more efficient and harmonious systems." "And is there any political content in the project?" Professor Robert was surprised by the question. "Political? No, Victoria, it's a pure science project. They're studying astronomy, physics, biology." "Why do you ask?" "I received a comment that the project might have an ideological bias." "What kind of bias?" "About social equality, mixing of classes, questioning hierarchies." Professor Robert began to understand the situation. He realized someone was interpreting the project politically when it was actually scientific and educational. Victoria, the only bias in this project is showing that in nature diversity is a strength, not a weakness. That's basic science, not ideology. I see. But don't you think children this age might misinterpret this information? On the contrary, I think they're interpreting it correctly. They're learning that individual differences can be complementary rather than divisive. Mrs. Victoria was in a dilemma. Professor Robert made sense, but she also knew about the political pressure she was facing. Robert, could you at least review the presentation with them? Make sure they focus on the scientific part and avoid making social analogies. Victoria, with all due respect, social analogies are natural when studying biological and astronomical systems. Removing that would be like taking the practical application out of science. I understand your position, but I need you to work with me on this, just to avoid misunderstandings. Professor Robert realized he was being pressured to censor an educational project for political reasons, and it deeply troubled him. All right, Victoria, I'll talk to them, but I won't ask them to change anything that's scientifically accurate. Thank you, Robert. It's just to avoid unnecessary problems. When Professor Robert left the principal's office, he was unsettled. He knew the 5 students' project was exemplary both academically and in terms of personal development, yet he was being forced to limit it due to outside pressures. During science class that afternoon, he decided to be honest with the group about the situation. Everyone, I need to talk to you about tomorrow's presentation. What's wrong, Professor? Is there a problem? Asked Zoe, noticing the serious tone in his voice. There's nothing wrong with your project, it's excellent. But the principal asked me to review the content of your presentation with you. Review how? Asked Abigail. She wants to make sure you focus on the scientific part and avoid making too many social analogies. The group exchanged glances, clearly confused. But Professor, said Madison, the social analogies are part of the project. That's what makes science interesting and applicable to real life. I know, Madison, and I agree with you. I'm just passing along the message. Olivia, always organized and practical, asked the obvious question, Professor, if we take out the social analogies, what's left of our project? The pure scientific part about the solar system. But anyone can present that, said Nathan. What makes our project special is showing how science connects to people's lives. Professor Roberts sighed. He didn't want to discourage the students, but he also couldn't completely ignore the principal's instructions. Look, everyone, you can keep the project as it is. Just soften the social analogies a bit. Instead of directly talking about different people working together, focus more on how different elements collaborate in nature. Zoe was starting to realize there were political forces trying to silence their project. Professor, did someone complain about our project? Professor? Robert hesitated before answering. Let's just say some people interpreted the project differently than you intended. Differently how? Insisted Zoe. Some think you're trying to push political messages instead of doing science. Abigail was outraged. But we're not doing politics. We're showing how nature works. I know that and you know that. But not everyone sees it that way. The group fell silent for a moment, processing the information. Finally, Zoe spoke. Professor, can we present the project as we originally planned? Technically, yes, but there might be consequences. What kind of consequences? I'm not entirely sure. Maybe cancellation of the presentation, maybe a talk with your parents, maybe other disciplinary actions. Olivia, ever practical, asked the question everyone was thinking. Is it worth the risk? The group exchanged glances. It was a tough decision for 10 and 11-year-olds. They were being forced to choose between their intellectual integrity and their school safety. Let's talk about it, Zoe finally said, and decide together. All right, said Professor Robert. Whatever you decide, I'll support. You. During recess, the 5 gathered in a quiet corner of the yard to discuss the situation. I don't get it, said Madison. Why are people afraid of us showing that collaboration works? Because if everyone believes it, some people will lose the power they have, Abigail replied with surprising wisdom for her age. What do you mean? Asked Nathan. Well, if everyone believes all people are important and capable, Then you can't use things like money or social class to feel superior to others. Olivia nodded, understanding the reasoning. It's like some people need others to feel inferior so they can feel important. Exactly, said Zoe. And our project shows that need is artificial, that everyone can be important in different ways. So what do we do? Asked Nathan. Change the project or keep it as is? I think we should keep it, Abigail said firmly. If we change it now, it's like agreeing our ideas are wrong. But what about the consequences? Madison asked worriedly. What consequences could be worse than giving up on something we know is right? Zoe replied. Olivia, who had recently joined the group, made an important observation. Guys, do you realize we're living exactly what we want to show in our project? How so? They all asked. We're facing a tough situation, and each of us is contributing a different perspective to find the solution. Abigail understood the politics behind it. Madison is worried about the risks. Nathan is being loyal to the group. Zoe is keeping focus on our principles, and I'm trying to organize our thoughts. The group fell silent for a moment, struck by Olivia's insight. She's right, Zoe finally said. We're proving our project works, even under pressure, to give up. Then our decision is made, Abigail declared. We present the full project as planned. Everyone agree? Asked Nathan. Agreed, said Madison. Agreed, said Olivia. Agreed, said Abigail. Agreed, said Zoe. At that moment, the five felt they weren't just doing a school project. They were taking a stand for something they deeply believed in. Across the yard, Tyler watched the group with growing frustration. He had hoped his father's pressure would lead to the cancellation of the presentation, but from what he could see, they were more determined than ever. He decided to make one last attempt at direct sabotage. He approached the group with a falsely concerned expression. Guys, can I talk to you? Shouts to the five exchanged glances, suspicious of Tyler's intentions. What do you want? Asked Zoe. I heard you're having trouble with your project. I came to warn you that maybe it's best to cancel. Why do you care? Asked Abigail. I don't care about you, said Tyler, losing his composure. But I don't want the whole school to turn into chaos because of your crazy ideas. What crazy ideas? Asked Olivia. This nonsense about everyone being equal, that it doesn't matter where someone comes from, that's a lie, and you know it. Why is it a lie? Asked Nathan, genuinely curious. Because it's obvious, look at yourselves. A poor girl from Rosedale Heights, a shy girl no one cared about, a boy who failed several subjects, a seamstress, and another who can barely read. How can you think you're equal to me and Ethan? The insult was so direct and cruel that even Tyler was surprised by his own words. He had completely revealed his prejudice without any disguise. The group fell silent for a few seconds, processing what they'd heard. Finally, Zoe responded, Tyler, thank you so much. Thank you? He asked, confused. Yes, you just proved exactly why our project is necessary. How so? You just showed everyone here, she gestured to the other students who had gathered, to listen, that there are people who truly believe some are worth more than others just because of where they were born or how much money they have. So what? It's the truth, retorted Tyler, unaware he was digging his own grave. No, Tyler, the truth is you just listed our traits as if they were flaws. But do you know what I see when I look at my group? Tyler crossed his arms, clearly annoyed. What do you see? I see Abigail, who has incredible creativity and a grasp of art and history that impresses the teachers. I see Madison, who can express through drawings things I couldn't even put into words. I see Nathan, who understands nature and animals in ways none of us do. I see Olivia, whose organizational and communication skills make everything run smoother. Several students listening began to nod, impressed by Zoe's response. And do you know what else I see? She continued. I see 5 people who've discovered they're stronger together than apart, that every difference between us, instead of dividing us, makes us more capable. That's just pretty talk, said Tyler, but his voice lacked conviction. Oh? Then explain one thing. You and Ethan, who according to you are superior to all of us, could you do a project like ours alone? Tyler stayed silent because he knew the answer was no. Could you organize 5 different people to work in harmony? Could you make each person feel valued and important? Could you create something that's scientific, creative, educational, and inspiring all at once? The audience of students was growing, and many began whispering among themselves, clearly impressed by Zoe's arguments. "We don't have to prove anything to you," said Tyler, trying to end the discussion. "You're right," agreed Zoe. "You don't have to prove anything. We're the ones who'll prove it. Tomorrow at the presentation, we'll show the whole school there's a different way for people to relate to each other. A way where everyone can shine." "You're gonna regret this," Tyler threatened. "My dad won't let you spread these ideas at school." "Your dad?" Abigail asked. "What does your dad have to do with our science project?" Tyler realized he'd said too much. Nothing, forget it. But Zoe understood exactly what was going on. "It was your dad who complained to the principal about our project, wasn't it?" No. "Yes, it was," said Olivia, putting the pieces together. "That's why Mr. Robert was told to review our presentation." The revelation caused murmurs among the watching students. Many began to realize there was an attempt at censorship happening. "And you know what this proves?" and Zoe said, looking straight at Tyler. "It proves you're scared of our ideas, because if they were really as wrong as you say, you wouldn't need adults to silence us." The remark hit like a bullseye. Tyler turned red with anger and humiliation, realizing he'd completely lost control of the situation. "You'll regret this," he said before walking away with Ethan. After the two left, the students who'd witnessed the argument gathered around the group of 5. "Dude, that was amazing how you stood up to them," said a 6th grade boy. "I wish I had your courage," said a girl from the same class. "Your project sounds really cool. When's the presentation?" "Tomorrow in science class," Olivia replied, clearly proud of the positive response. "Can we watch?" "Of course," said Madison. "The more, the better." At that moment, the 5 realized their project had become something bigger than they'd imagined. It wasn't just a school assignment anymore. It had turned into a symbol of resistance against prejudice and discrimination. That afternoon, when they got home, they all told their parents about the day's events. Reactions varied, but all were supportive. Madison's mom was worried about possible retaliation, but proud of her daughter's courage. Nathan's dad was impressed by his son's maturity. Abigail's parents were moved to see how much she'd blossomed since joining the group. Olivia's mom, Diane, a hard-working 42-year-old seamstress, was especially touched when her daughter shared how valued and included she'd felt. "Sweetheart, I'm so proud of you," she said, hugging Olivia. "You've always been special, but now you're realizing it too." And Denise, when Zoe told her all the details, felt a mix of pride and concern. "Honey, are you sure you want to face this? Things might get hard for us." "I'm sure, Mom. I can't let people like Tyler and his dad decide what kind of person I can be or what ideas I can have. What if they really try to hurt you? Then at least we tried to do the right thing, and that's better than staying quiet and letting injustice happen." Denise looked at her daughter and saw a strength and determination that filled her with pride. She'd spent her whole life trying not to make waves, trying to fit in without causing trouble. Seeing Zoe stand up for what she believed in was both inspiring and frightening. "All right, sweetheart, I support you. But promise me if things get too hard, you'll tell me?" "I promise, Mom." That night, Zoe spent hours planning the final details of the presentation. She knew it had to be perfect because so many people would be looking for reasons to criticize. On Friday morning, the entire school was buzzing about the presentation scheduled for science class. The news had spread organically, and many students were curious to see what Zoe's group had prepared. During the teacher's breakfast, Mrs. Margaret remarked to Mrs. Catherine, "Did you hear about the presentation happening today in Robert's class?" "I did. And from what I gather, it's causing quite a stir." "A good stir or a bad one?" "Depends on who you ask. The students are excited. Some parents are concerned. The administration is nervous. And you, what do you think?" Mrs. Catherine thought for a moment before answering. "I think it's exactly the kind of project that should happen more often in schools. Kids thinking critically, collaborating, applying scientific knowledge to understand social issues. It's education in its purest form. I hope everything goes well for them." "Me too." During the first class of the morning, the group of 5 could barely focus on the lesson. They were anxious, nervous, but also determined. At recess, they ran through one last review of their presentation. Each knew their part perfectly, and they had practiced the transitions between segments countless times. "Everyone," Zoe said, "no matter what happens today, I want you to know I'm proud of each of you." "We're proud of you too, Zoe," Abigail replied. "You showed us we could be more than we imagined." "We all did that for each other," Madison added. "That's the whole point of the project." "Let's crush it," Nathan said with a grin. "We will," Olivia agreed. By the time science class arrived, the room was more crowded than ever. Alongside their classmates, students from other grades had asked permission to attend. Several teachers were also present, including Mrs. Catherine and Mrs. Margaret. Principal Victoria sat at the back, clearly uneasy about all the attention. The presentation was drawing. Mr. Roberts stood to introduce the group. "Everyone, today we'll be watching the presentation of the project Collaborative Systems in the Universe, developed by Zoe, Madison, Abigail, Nathan, and Olivia." The 5 took their places at the front of the room. Zoe could feel her heart pounding, but when she glanced at her friends and saw the confidence and support in their eyes, she felt calmer. "Good morning, everyone," she began. "Our project is about how different elements in the universe work together to create systems stronger and more harmonious than any single element could achieve alone." "Let's start with the solar system," Abigail said, stepping into her part. "Throughout history, different cultures observed the stars and planets and discovered they function like one big celestial family, where each member plays an important role." Madison stepped forward, displaying the drawings she had prepared. Beautiful, detailed depictions of the solar system, each planet rendered with an artistic touch that made it unique. "As you can see in these drawings," she said, with a confidence that surprised even herself, "each planet has distinct characteristics, but they all orbit together around the sun, creating a stable and beautiful system." Nathan took over next. "In nature, we see this same pattern everywhere. Bees work together in hives, each with a different role. Wolves hunt in packs, using each member's unique skills. Even plants in a forest collaborate, some providing shade, others enriching the soil, others attracting pollinators." "And the most interesting part," said Olivia, "is that when we observe these collaborative systems, we find they are more efficient, resilient, and successful than when elements work alone." So far, the presentation was going perfectly. The audience was clearly engaged, and even Principal Victoria seemed to be enjoying the content. That's when Zoe took over for the riskiest part of the presentation. "Now we'll show how these principles apply to our own group and our project." She could see Tyler and Ethan at the back of the room, watching with tense expressions. Principal Victoria leaned forward, clearly hanging on every word. "When we started this project, each of us had different skills and knowledge. Abigail knew about history and ancient cultures. Madison had artistic and visual talent. Nathan understood nature and animals. Olivia was organized and good at communication, and I had a knack for math and science. If each of us had done a project alone," Abigail continued, "we'd have 5 separate presentations, maybe good ones, but limited by each person's individual knowledge. But by working together," Madison said, "we created something much bigger. Everyone contributed what they did best, and the result was a project none of us could have done alone. And we discovered something even more important," Nathan added. "We found that our differences, instead of dividing us, made us stronger." Olivia took the next step in the presentation. "For example, I always thought that because I was shy and not great at math, I didn't have much to contribute to a science project. But I learned that my ability to organize and communicate was crucial to the group's success. And I always felt inferior because I had to repeat a grade," Abigail said. "But I realized my different experience gave me creative perspectives that enriched the project. I thought that because I was so quiet, no one would care about my ideas," Madison said. "But I found that my unique way of seeing things was valued and important. I always felt dumb for struggling in some subjects," Nathan admitted. "But I discovered my knowledge about nature was unique and valuable." Finally, Zoe concluded, And I learned that no matter how much I love studying and organizing, I need my friends' different perspectives to come up with truly interesting ideas. Alone, I'm just a good science student. With my friends, I can help create amazing things. The presentation had been delivered so naturally and sincerely that the audience was visibly moved. Many students nodded, clearly relating to the shared experiences. Our scientific conclusion, Zoe said, is that collaborative systems, whether in the universe or among people, are more efficient, creative, and successful than competitive or hierarchical ones. And our personal conclusion, Abigail added, is that when we value each person's differences instead of judging them, everyone becomes stronger and happier. The presentation ended, and for a few seconds the room was silent. Then, slowly, applause began. First a few students, then others, until the whole room was clapping enthusiastically. Mr. Robert stood up, clearly emotional. Everyone, that was one of the most impressive presentations I've seen in my career. You didn't just demonstrate scientific knowledge, you applied it in a practical and inspiring way. Several students raised their hands to ask questions. How did you figure out you worked well together? A 6th grade girl asked. We didn't realize it all at once, Olivia answered. It was a process. First Zoe and Madison met during a math activity. Then Abigail joined, then me, then Nathan. And with each person who joined, the group became more interesting. Did you guys ever argue during the project? A boy asked. We didn't argue, Nathan said, but we had different opinions sometimes. The difference is that instead of fighting over those differences, we talked to understand why each of us thought a certain way. And did that always work? The boy pressed. Almost always, Abigail replied, and when it didn't work right away, we took a break and talked again later. A 5th grade student raised her hand. Do you think any group of people can work together? Like that? We think so, Madison answered. But everyone has to want to. All the people in the group have to be willing to value what others bring instead of focusing on what they lack. And you have to be willing to contribute too, Zoe added. You can't just expect to receive, everyone has to give their best to the group. The questions continued for several minutes, and the group's answers were consistently impressive, showing not just technical knowledge, but also emotional and social maturity. Finally, Catherine spoke up. You 5 just gave us a lesson that goes far beyond science. You showed us how education should work, learning from each other, valuing differences, collaborating to create something greater than the sum of its parts. Margaret, the math teacher, also spoke. As a math teacher, I would have been satisfied if you had just demonstrated scientific knowledge, but you did so much more. You taught us about humanity. It was clear the presentation had been an absolute success. The students were excited, the teachers were impressed, and even some school staff who had stopped to watch were applauding. But there were 2 people in the room who weren't happy at all, Tyler and Ethan. And there was one person who was clearly uncomfortable, Principal Victoria. When the applause finally died down and the students began to disperse, Principal Victoria approached Robert. Robert, I need to speak with you after class. Her tone was serious and Robert sensed trouble ahead. At lunch, the entire cafeteria was buzzing about the presentation. The group of 5 was being congratulated by students of all ages, and many were asking how they could apply the same principles to their own projects and friendships. Wow, I never thought so many people would be interested in our project, Madison said, clearly overwhelmed by the positive attention. It's because what you said makes sense, a 7th grade girl said as she approached their table. I always felt weird for liking different things than other girls my age, but hearing you, I realized that might be a good thing. Of course, it's a good thing, Abigail said. Being different is what makes you special. Can I sit with you? The girl asked. Of course, they all answered in unison. And so the group of 5 began to grow, attracting students who connected with their message of acceptance and valuing differences. But on the other side of the cafeteria, Tyler was furious. This can't go on, he said to Ethan. They're turning the whole school to their side. Tyler, man, maybe they have a point, Ethan said hesitantly. What do you mean? Tyler looked at his friend in disbelief. Well, their presentation made sense, and everyone seemed to like it. Maybe We're wrong to want people to stay apart. Ethan, are you crazy? Have you forgotten who you are, where you come from? I haven't forgotten. I'm just thinking maybe it's not as important as we believed. Tyler realized he was losing his best friend to Zoe's dangerous ideas, and that made him even more desperate. Fine, he said. If you want to side with them, go ahead. But don't come crying to me when you realize they were just using you. Ethan was hurt by his friend's reaction, but he was also starting to question whether Tyler was really the kind of friend he wanted to keep. Meanwhile, in the principal's office, Principal Victoria was on the phone with Richard Williams. Richard, the presentation happened this morning. And how did it go? It was very well received. The students loved it. The teachers praised it. Victoria, you're missing my concern. The issue isn't whether it was well received. The issue is the kind of ideas being spread. But Richard, these were ideas about collaboration and mutual respect. I don't see a problem with that. The problem is, these ideas challenge the natural order of things. If all the children start believing they're equal to one another, how will they learn about hierarchy, authority, respect for social positions? Mrs. Victoria was beginning to understand that Richard wasn't worried about education. He was worried about maintaining social privilege. Richard, with all due respect, I think hierarchy and authority are concepts children learn naturally. What they need to learn is how to coexist respectfully with people who are different. Victoria, you're being naive. These children will grow up and enter the workforce, society. If they don't understand early on that there are different positions for different people, they'll struggle in adulthood. Or maybe they'll grow up and create a better society where people are valued for their contributions, not their backgrounds. There was silence on the other end. Richard hadn't expected Mrs. Victoria to confront his views so directly. Victoria, I hope you reflect on what you're saying. I also hope you consider the continuation of certain activities at the school. The threat was implied but clear. Richard was using his influence to pressure the principal into taking action against Zoe's group. After hanging up, Mrs. Victoria sat deep in thought. She was being forced to choose between doing what she believed was educationally right and maintaining political peace at the school. She decided to speak with Teacher Robert to better understand her options. Robert, could you come here? When the teacher entered the room, she got straight to the point. Robert, this morning's presentation was excellent from an educational standpoint. Thank you, Victoria. I thought so too. But it's causing political complications. What kind of complications? Some influential families are concerned about the messages being given to the children. What messages? Collaboration, respect for differences, valuing diversity? Exactly. They think these messages might confuse the children about social structures. Teacher Robert began to grasp the real nature of the problem. Victoria, are you telling me some parents want the school to teach prejudice to children? It's not exactly that. It's exactly that. They want some children to grow up thinking they're superior to others. And they want other children to grow up thinking they're inferior. Robert, I don't agree with that view, but I also have to consider the school's political reality. And what is that reality? That some families have more influence than others, and if I don't address their concerns, I could face serious trouble. What kind of trouble? Pressure from the school board, complaints at the HAE, Department of Education, possibly even questions about my position as principal. Mr. Robert was shocked by the principal's honesty. Victoria, are you telling me your job depends on censoring educational projects that promote equality and respect? Not when you put it that way, but when influential families feel threatened, they can create real problems. And what do you plan to do? I don't know yet. I'm trying to find a middle ground. What kind of middle ground? Maybe letting the group continue with the project, but with less visibility. No public presentations, no involvement from other students. Victoria, that would be punishing these kids for having ideas that promote inclusion and respect. I know, and it troubles me deeply. Then don't do it. Robert, it's not that simple. Yes, it is, Victoria. It's exactly that simple. You can choose to support quality education, or give in to pressure from people who want to maintain unfair privileges. There's no middle ground here. The conversation ended without a clear resolution, but both knew a decision would have to be made soon. Meanwhile, the group of 5 was at home, each telling their family about the success of the presentation. The reactions were all positive, but also concerned. Denise, especially, was anxious about possible retaliation. "Sweetheart, I'm afraid you've upset some powerful people." "Mom, we just did a science presentation about cooperation. There's nothing wrong with that." "I know there's nothing wrong. But you know how the world is, my dear. The people who are right don't always win. So we should stop standing up for what's right." "That's not what I mean. It's just sometimes you have to be strategic, pick your battles." "Mom, if we don't fight for what we believe in, who will?" Zoe's question struck Denise deeply. She herself had spent her life avoiding conflict, accepting injustices, trying not to make waves. Seeing her daughter have the courage to take a stand was both inspiring and frightening. "You're right, sweetheart. Just promise me you'll be careful." "I promise, Mom." On Saturday morning, Zoe woke up with a strange feeling. There was something in the air that unsettled her, like a storm was coming. Her intuition was right. At that very moment, Richard Williams was meeting with other influential parents from the school to discuss the Zoe problem. "Folks, what it said to the group gathered at his house, "we need to act fast before this situation spirals out of control." "But Richard," said Ethan's mother, Jennifer Johnson, "wasn't it just a school project? My son said it was very well done." "Jennifer, you don't understand the seriousness of this. It wasn't a school project. It was an ideological indoctrination session." "What do you mean?" asked Caleb's father, Gregory Harris. "They were teaching kids that it doesn't matter where you come from, how much money your family has, or what education you've received. That everyone is equal. That's dangerous." "Why is it dangerous?" asked Jennifer, genuinely confused. "Because it's not true," Richard snapped. "People aren't all equal. Some have more ability, more education, better opportunities. And it's natural for those people to have different positions in society." "But Richard," said Gregory, "even if that's true, what's wrong with teaching kids to respect each other?" "The problem is, when you teach that everyone is equal, you're devaluing the effort of people who've actually excelled. You're saying it doesn't matter if someone studied, worked hard, built something. Everyone is worth the same." Jennifer still wasn't convinced. "But from what I understood, they weren't saying everyone has the same abilities. They were saying people with different abilities can work together." "Exactly, and that's even worse," said Richard. "Because if children grow up believing that, they won't understand why some people give orders and others obey. They won't understand why there are bosses and employees, rich and poor." "And you think they should understand that?" asked Gregory. "Of course they should. That's how the world works. And if they don't learn it early, they'll struggle when they grow up." The discussion went on for over an hour, with Richard trying to convince the other parents that Zoe's project posed a real threat to the social order. Some parents were swayed by his arguments. Others were uncomfortable with the aggressiveness of his speech. But they all agreed that something needed to be done. "What do you suggest?" asked Jennifer. "First, we'll pressure the principal to cancel any continuation of this project. Second, we'll demand that these students be instructed on appropriate school behavior. Third, we'll propose alternative activities that teach more traditional values." "And if the principal doesn't agree," asked Gregory, "then we take it to the school board. And if the board doesn't agree, we go to the Department of Education." "Isn't that going too far?" asked Jennifer. "Jennifer, our children are being exposed to ideologies that could harm their development. As responsible parents, we have a duty to protect them." On Monday morning, Principal Victoria received a phone call she had been expecting, but it still left her tense. "Ms. Victoria, this is the Secretary of Education, Councilman William Spencer. He'd like to schedule a meeting with you this afternoon if possible." "What's it about?" "Concerns raised by parents of students at your school." Ms. Victoria knew exactly what those concerns were. The pressure had escalated to the municipal level. "Of course. What time would work?" 3 p.m. at the councilman's office. That morning, Ms. Victoria spoke with several teachers to better understand the situation and prepare her defense of the project. Teacher Catherine was especially firm. Victoria, this project is exactly the kind of initiative we should be encouraging. If we start censoring projects that promote inclusion and respect, where will it end? Teacher Robert agreed. Besides, pedagogically, the project is flawless. They demonstrated scientific knowledge, teamwork, presentation skills, and critical thinking. It's an example of what education can achieve when it works well. The physical education teacher, Sarah, also offered her support. I've noticed positive changes in several students' behavior since this group formed. Less bullying, more cooperation, more inclusion of students who usually stayed isolated. But teacher Patricia raised a troubling point. Victoria, I fully support the project, but I'm also worried about the kids. If the political pressure keeps growing, they could end up getting hurt. Hurt how? Well, if influential parents really push, they could make school life very hard for them. They could pressure for transfers, create difficulties for their families, even affect their chances at future schools. Teacher Patricia's observation added a new dimension to the problem. It wasn't just about educational principles, it was also about protecting the children involved. In the afternoon, Mrs. Victoria Thompson went to the office of Councilman William Spencer, a 55-year-old man who had held the position for nearly a decade and was known for being sensitive to political pressures. Victoria, thank you. For coming, please have a seat. Thank you, Councilman. I've received some calls about activities happening at your school, concerns from responsible parents about the kind of education their children are receiving. May I ask what the specific concerns are? Apparently there's a group of students promoting ideas about, how should I put it, radical social equality among children. Councilman, with all due respect, the project in question is about scientific cooperation and valuing diversity. I don't see anything radical in that. Victoria, I understand your position, but you need to understand that as educators, we have a responsibility to teach values that prepare children for the reality of the adult world. And don't those values include mutual respect and collaboration? They do, of course, but they also include understanding that there are different levels of ability, different social positions, different responsibilities. Children need to understand that life isn't just about cooperation. There's also competition, hierarchy, leadership. Mrs. Thompson realized she was facing the same mindset Richard Williams had expressed, but now at a higher official level. Councilman, may I ask if you've seen the students' presentation? Not in person, but I've received detailed reports. From whom? From concerned parents who were present. I see. And did these parents mention that the presentation was praised by all the teachers present? That it demonstrated academic excellence? That the students showed impressive scientific knowledge for their age? The councilman grew uncomfortable with the questions. Victoria, I'm not questioning the academic quality. I'm concerned about the social implications. What social implications, Councilman? Children learning to value each other's abilities? Learning that differences can be complementary rather than divisive? Victoria, you're being naive. When you teach children that everyone is equally valuable, you're setting them up for disappointment in adulthood. How so? Because in real life, not everyone is equally valuable. Some people truly contribute more to society than others. Some people truly deserve better positions than others. Mrs. Thompson felt a wave of indignation, but managed to keep her composure. Councilman, may I suggest you personally attend one of these students' presentations before forming a final opinion? Victoria, I've already made my decision. I want these activities stopped. I want the students guided toward appropriate behavior. And I want the school to implement activities that teach more balanced values. And if I disagree, then I'll have to consider whether you're the right person to run a municipal school. The threat was direct and clear. Mrs. Thompson was being forced to choose between her educational conscience and her professional security. May I have some time to consider your guidance? Of course, but not too long. This situation needs to be resolved quickly. When Mrs. Thompson returned to the school, she was visibly shaken. The pressure had reached a level she hadn't expected, and the consequences of her decisions would affect not only her career, but also the lives of 5 children who had done nothing but demonstrate educational excellence. She decided to speak with Mr. Robert Anderson again. "Robert, the situation has become more complicated than I imagined." "What happened?" "I was called in by the municipal councilman. He wants me to stop the group's activities and implement guidance on appropriate behavior." "Victoria, this is pure and simple educational censorship." "I know, but if I don't comply, I could lose my job. And if you do, you'll be betraying everything you believe in as an educator." "Exactly. I'm in an impossible situation. Victoria, can I suggest an alternative?" "What?" "How about calling a meeting with all the parents at the school? Present the project in full, let everyone see for themselves what it's about." "Do you think that would work?" "I think it's worth a try. If most parents support the project, it'll be harder for the board to justify censoring it. And if most don't support it, then at least we'll have fought the right way." The idea of a general parent meeting was risky, but Mrs. Victoria realized it might be the only fair way to resolve the situation. "All right, William, let's hold the meeting, but I want you to prepare the group of 5 for a flawless presentation. They'll only get one chance to show all the parents that their critics are wrong." "They'll be ready, Victoria." On Tuesday morning, when the 5 arrived at school, they immediately sensed something had changed. Other students looked at them differently, some with admiration, others with curiosity, and a few with a hostility that hadn't been there before. During recess, Tyler approached the group with a triumphant smirk. "Hope you all enjoyed your 5 minutes of fame." "What do you mean?" Zoe asked. "That the party's over. My dad and other parents talk to important people, and you'll have to drop this nonsense about everyone being equal." "Tyler, it's not nonsense. It's science," Abigail said. "It's ideology. And now you're going to learn about consequences." Olivia bristled at the threat in his tone. "What consequences, Tyler? We didn't do anything wrong." "Yes, you did. You tried to mess with the school's natural order. And that comes with a price." "What natural order?" Nathan asked. "The order where everyone stays in their place and respects those above them." Madison, who rarely confronted anyone directly, surprised everyone when she said, "Tyler, you're not above anyone. You just think you are." "Oh yeah? Then why can my dad get your project shut down while yours can't do a thing about it?" The question hit the group like a punch. They realized political pressure was being used to silence them, and that their families had far less power to protect them than their opponents did. "That's not right," Zoe said, but her voice lacked its usual confidence. "Right or wrong doesn't matter," Tyler said coldly. "What matters is who has power, and you just learned who does and who doesn't." After Tyler walked away, the group stood silent for several minutes. For the first time since becoming friends, they felt disheartened and scared. "Do you think he's right?" Madison whispered. "That power matters more than being right." "I don't know," Nathan admitted, "but I'm starting to understand why so many people give up fighting for important things." "Guys," Abigail said, "we can't quit now. Not after everything we've discovered about ourselves and how people can work together." "But Abby," Olivia said, "what if they really can hurt us? What if they do something to our families?" It was a valid concern, and Zoe knew she couldn't downplay it. "I'll be honest with you all. I'm scared too. But I'm scared of 2 things. I'm scared of what they might do to us if we keep going, but I'm also scared of what'll happen to me if I give up." "What do you mean?" Madison asked. "If I quit now, I'll spend the rest of my life knowing I let people like Tyler and his dad decide what kind of person I'm allowed to be. And that scares me more than anything they could do." Zoe's words deeply touched her friends. Each one began to reflect on their own motivations and fears. "Zoe is right," Abigail finally said. "If we give up now, we'll be agreeing that they're right, that some people really are worth more than others." "And I don't believe that," Nathan added. "Nothing they've done or said has convinced me they're better people than any of you." "Me neither," Madison chimed in. "In fact, the way they're acting just proves our ideas were right all along." "How so?" Olivia asked. "Think about it," Madison replied. "If they were truly superior like they claim, they wouldn't need to use power and intimidation to silence us. They could just prove they're right with arguments." Madison's observation was brilliant and gave the group new energy. That's true, Olivia said. The fact that they need political force to shut us up proves they can't beat us in a battle of ideas. So, are we decided? Zoe asked. Are we going to keep fighting? We are, they all answered in unison, but their resolve would be tested, more than they imagined. On Wednesday, Mr. Anderson called them in for a talk before class. Everyone, I need to tell you something. Principal Victoria scheduled a general parents' meeting for Friday night. You'll have to present your project again, this time to all the parents at the school. Is that good or bad? Nathan asked. Depends. If you can convince most of the parents, you can keep the project going. If not, you'll have to stop it. And what else? Zoe pressed, sensing there was more. Well, some parents have already organized an alternative presentation. They'll argue against your ideas and propose a different educational model. What kind of model? Abigail asked. One that emphasizes competition over collaboration, hierarchy over equality, and, well, the idea that some people naturally deserve better positions than others. The group realized they weren't just defending their project. They were part of a debate about two completely different visions of how society should work. Mr. Anderson, Olivia asked, what are our chances? Honestly, I don't know. You have the advantage of a concrete project with proven results. They have more political and social influence. Will it be a fair fight? Madison questioned. No, Mr. Anderson admitted, but sometimes the most important battles aren't fair. They're necessary. For the rest of the week, the school split into two camps. On one side were students inspired by Zoe and her friend's presentation. On the other were those whose parents had warned them to distance themselves from the troublemakers. Ethan was visibly torn. He had been moved by the presentation and had started questioning the views he'd inherited from home. But his family and Tyler were pressuring him to oppose the group. On Thursday, he approached Zoe during recess. Zoe, can I talk to you? Of course, Ethan. I wanted to apologize for the things I said to you and your friends. Zoe was surprised by the sincerity in his voice. Why are you apologizing? Because I realized I was wrong. After your presentation, I started thinking about what my parents taught me, about what Tyler always says, and I realized it doesn't make much sense. What do you mean? Well, if some people were naturally superior to others, they wouldn't need to prove it by putting others down, right? Truly superior people would prove it by being kind, intelligent, and helpful. Ethan's observation showed a maturity Zoe hadn't expected from him. Ethan, do you want to join Friday's presentation? I'd like to, but I'm afraid my parents might disown me if they found out. I understand. It's hard to go against your own family. Yeah, but it's also hard to live pretending to believe in things you know are wrong. You don't have to decide. Now, think it over carefully and do what feels right. Thanks, Zoe, for not judging me even after everything I've done. Ethan, everyone deserves the chance to change their mind when they learn something better. The conversation between Zoe and Ethan was watched from a distance by Tyler, who grew furious realizing he was losing his best friend to the enemy. That afternoon, Tyler confronted Ethan more aggressively than ever. Ethan, you're betraying everything we've always believed in. Tyler, I'm not betraying anything. I'm just questioning whether some of the things we've always believed are actually right. Of course they're right. Our families, my family, built important positions in society. That didn't happen by accident. It happened because we're better than others, or because we had more opportunities than others. Ethan, you're starting to sound just like that, Zoe. What if she's right? She's not right, and if you keep thinking like this, you won't be my friend anymore. Tyler's threat put Ethan in an impossible position, choosing between an old friendship or his emerging convictions. Tyler, does our friendship depend on me agreeing with everything you think? It depends on you not betraying your own social class. I'm not betraying anything. I'm just trying to understand why we have to look down on others to feel important. Because that's how the world works. The strong dominate the weak, the smart lead the foolish, the rich rule the poor. It's natural law. And you think that's right? I think that's reality. And those who don't accept it end up crushed by it. The conversation ended unresolved, but both knew something fundamental had shifted between them. By Friday morning, the tension at school was palpable. Everyone knew about the parents' meeting that night and the clash between two completely different worldviews. Zoe and her friends spent the day reviewing their presentation one last time. They had decided to keep the original content, but polished their delivery to make their ideas even clearer and more persuasive. "Guys," Zoe said, "no matter what happens tonight, I want you to know you've changed my life." Before meeting, I thought being good at math and science was enough. You showed me that true intelligence is about understanding and valuing people. You changed our lives too," Abigail said. "You showed us we could be more than we thought possible. And that differences can be strengths, not weaknesses," Madison added. "And that real friendship means supporting each other. So everyone grows," Nathan said. "And that we can fight for what matters even when it's hard," Olivia concluded. In that moment, regardless of the meeting's outcome, they knew they had already won something important. They had discovered the power of genuine collaboration and mutual respect. At 7 that evening, the school auditorium was packed. Entire families had come and the tension in the air was almost tangible. Mrs. Victoria took the stage to open the meeting. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. We are here today to discuss an educational project that has sparked much conversation in our school community." She briefly explained the situation and outlined the meeting format. First, Zoe Thompson's group would present their project, then some critical parents would share their observations, and finally, there would be a period for questions and general discussion. Let's begin with the presentation by students Zoe Thompson, Abigail Wilson, Madison Cooper, Nathan Carter, and Olivia Baker. The 5 stepped onto the stage, and Zoe could see their families in the audience, all wearing expressions of pride and nervousness. She also spotted Richard Williams and other critical parents in the front rows, their faces clearly hostile. But there was something new in the audience that surprised her. Ethan Johnson was sitting with his parents, though his expression suggested he was wrestling with an internal conflict. The presentation began exactly as they had rehearsed, but with even greater passion and conviction. Each group member spoke eloquently about their scientific and personal discoveries. When they finished, there was a brief silence followed by enthusiastic applause from part of the audience, though there were also disapproving murmurs. Richard Williams was the first to stand and speak. "Fellow parents, what we just witnessed was a very well-rehearsed presentation of dangerous ideas." He spent the next 15 minutes arguing that the project promoted unrealistic egalitarianism, disrespect for authority, and confusion about necessary social structures. "Our children need to understand early on that there are natural differences between people, and these differences result in different social positions. If we teach them everyone is equal, we're setting them up for disappointment in adulthood." Several other parents echoed similar sentiments, claiming that excessive collaboration could harm the development of necessary competitive instincts, and that valuing diversity might lead to widespread mediocrity. When it was time for questions, a mother in the audience raised her hand. "I'd like to ask the students, do you really believe your project works in practice, or is it just nice-sounding theory?" Olivia stepped forward to answer. "Ma'am, our project isn't theory, it's our real experience. Before we met, each of us had limitations and insecurities. By working together, we all became more capable and confident." "But don't you think that's just because you're still children?" the mother pressed. "In the adult world, things are different." Abigail took over the response. "My mother always worked alone as a seamstress, but recently she teamed up with other seamstresses in the neighborhood to share costs and clients. The result? They all earned more money and had less stress. Collaboration works at any age." A father stood up with a more hostile question. "Don't you think you're being used by adults with a political agenda to spread ideologies you don't fully understand?" The question was clearly an attempt to undermine the group, implying they were just puppets of manipulative adults. Zoe answered this one. "Sir, I can assure you our ideas came from our own experiences. No adult told us what to think. In fact, some adults tried to stop us from thinking." The response stirred murmurs in the audience, and Richard Williams visibly bristled. "No one tried to stop you from thinking," he said, standing up. "We tried to guide you to think more realistically." How is that more realistic? Zoe asked. Realistic about the fact that not all people have the same abilities or deserve the same opportunities. And who decides that? Abigail challenged. Life itself decides. People who work harder, study more, and make better choices naturally achieve better positions. But, sir, Nathan interrupted, what about people who work hard but are born into poor families? Or those who are smart but don't have access to good schools? Or those who make good choices but face prejudice? Nathan's question put Richard in a tough spot, because the honest answer would mean admitting the social system isn't as meritocratic as he'd like to believe. Well, there are always exceptions, but generally, the system works. For whom? Madison asked, with a courage that surprised even herself. For society as a whole, even when it leaves talented people without opportunities just because of where they were born, Madison pressed. At that moment, something unexpected happened. Ethan stood up in the audience. Can I speak? Richard was surprised, but motioned for the boy to continue. I always believed what my dad and Mr. Williams said, but after hearing these 5 speak, I started thinking differently. Ethan, said Jennifer, his mother, clearly embarrassed, sit down. No, Mom, I need to say this. He turned to the crowd. Do you know the difference between them and me? They offered me friendship even after I was cruel to them. They valued me for what I had to offer instead of judging me for my mistakes. Doesn't that seem better to you? A deep silence fell over the auditorium. An 11-year-old boy had just put into words something many adults struggled to understand. Ethan, Richard said, trying to regain control, you're confusing kindness with political realism. No, Mr. Williams, I'm realizing that kindness is political realism, because when people are good to each other, everyone grows stronger. At that moment, other students in the audience began standing up to speak. It was as if Ethan's courage had unleashed a wave of honesty that had been held back. A 6th grade girl stood. My parents always told me I was better than some other kids at school, but after seeing their project, I realized being better doesn't mean making others feel worse. It means using what's good in you to help everyone improve. A 7th grade boy spoke up too. I've always been ashamed because my dad's a janitor and my friends' parents have better jobs. But hearing them talk, I realized my dad helps keep the city clean, and that matters. Every honest job has value. One by one, students shared how the presentation had made them rethink their own attitudes and prejudices. Richard was losing control completely. His attempt to expose the dangerous ideas of the 5 had turned into a session where children and teens showed more wisdom and compassion than many adults present. He made one last desperate attempt. Everyone, you're getting carried away by emotion, but education policy can't be based on feelings. It has to prepare children for the real world. Then an unexpected voice spoke from the crowd. It was Denise, Zoe's mother. Mr. Williams, may I ask a question? Of course. Do you have children? Yes, Tyler. And do you want Tyler to grow up happy? Of course. Do you think happiness comes from feeling superior to others or from having real relationships with people? Denise's question struck right at the heart of Richard's argument, because deep down every parent wants their child to be happy, and genuine happiness rarely comes from artificial superiority. I want my son to be successful in life. And do you believe success means having power over others, or does it mean making a positive contribution to the world? Richard was clearly uncomfortable but tried to hold his ground. Success means achieving a good social position, financial security, respect from the community. And do you think those things are more important than the ability to love and be loved, to make a positive difference in other people's lives, to look in the mirror and be proud of the person you've become? Denise's questions were exposing the emotional and spiritual poverty of the life philosophy Richard was defending. Other mothers began speaking up, supporting Denise's ideas and sharing their own thoughts about what they truly wanted for their children. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. The meeting was turning into something no one had expected. a moment of deep collective reflection about values, education, and the kind of society everyone wanted to build. Mrs. Victoria, realizing the discussion had gone beyond the specific issue of the project, decided to step in. "Everyone, I think we're all learning a lot tonight. I propose we take a vote. All parents who support continuing the 5 students project, raise your hands." Slowly, hands began to rise in the audience, first a few, then many, until it became clear that the vast majority of parents present supported the project. And parents who opposed the project, only a few hands went up, including Richard Williams and some of his closest allies. "Very well," said Mrs. Victoria. "By a wide majority, the parents of this school approve the continuation of the educational project developed by the 5 students." There was enthusiastic applause from most of the audience, but Richard Williams stood up again, clearly furious. "This isn't over," he said. "I'm taking this issue to higher authorities. I won't allow dangerous ideologies to corrupt my son's education." "Mr. Williams," Mrs. Victoria said calmly, "you have every right to pursue other avenues, but you also have the right to transfer your son to a school that aligns more closely with your beliefs." The suggestion caught Richard by surprise. He hadn't expected the principal to be so direct. "Are you kicking me out? I'm not expelling anyone. I'm simply reminding you that education is a choice and parents have the right to choose learning environments that reflect their values." The message was clear. Richard could keep fighting the school's educational philosophy, or he could find a school that better matched his views. After the meeting, several families approached the group of 5 to congratulate them and express their support. But the most touching moment came when Ethan walked up, accompanied by his mother, Jennifer. "Zoe," Jennifer Johnson said, "I wanted to apologize for my son's behavior earlier this year, and I wanted to thank you all for showing him a better way to see the world." "There's no need to apologize, Mrs. Johnson," Zoe replied. "Ethan is a good person. He just needed time to realize that." Can I be part of your group?" Ethan asked timidly. The 5 exchanged glances and smiled. "Of course you can," Abigail said. "The more good people, the better." And so, the group of 5 became a group of 6. But the victory at the parent meeting didn't solve everything. True to his word, Richard Williams took his campaign to higher levels, filing complaints with the Municipal Education Department and the State Department of Education. Over the next few weeks, there were several visits from educational inspectors to the school, all aimed at investigating the questionable teaching practices that had been reported. Each investigation, however, reached the same conclusion. The project was pedagogically sound, academically excellent, and was producing measurable positive results in the students' social and emotional development. But Richard didn't give up. He launched a broader campaign, using his business connections to pressure school suppliers, trying to influence school board members and even threatening to withdraw past donations. The pressure was intense, but something unexpected happened. Other parents, inspired by the courage of Denise Thompson and the families who had supported the project, began organizing in defense of the school and the educational values it was promoting. Mrs. Diane, Olivia's mother, formed a group of working mothers who volunteered their time at the school. Nathan's father, a skilled mechanic, offered to make free repairs to the school's infrastructure. Madison's mother, a retired librarian, volunteered to reorganize the school library. What Richard hadn't anticipated was that his attempt to use economic power to control education had mobilized a community support network, far stronger and more resilient than any individual influence. During this time, the group of 6 continued working together, developing new projects and inspiring other students to form their own collaborative groups. They created a school garden where different plants were cultivated by different student groups, demonstrating how biodiversity creates stronger ecosystems. They organized a talent festival where instead of competition, the focus was collaboration. Students with different skills worked together to create performances no one could achieve alone. They developed a cross-age tutoring program where older students helped younger ones but also learned from them. Each activity reinforced the principles they had discovered: diversity as strength, collaboration as a superior strategy to competition, and valuing each person's unique qualities. Tyler, isolated by Ethan's change of heart and the growing popularity of collaborative ideals in the school, became increasingly bitter and lonely. He tried to form a rival group based on competition and hierarchy, but found few students interested in activities that made them feel inferior or excluded. His attempts at sabotage and provocation lost steam because Zoe's group had grown so large he could no longer target isolated individuals. But the hardest part for Tyler was realizing his own father was losing influence in the community. Richard's campaign against the school had become so extreme and obsessive that other influential families began distancing themselves from him. By the end of the second quarter, something no one expected happened. The State Department of Education invited the school to present the 6 Students Project as a model of innovative collaborative education at a seminar on best educational practices. The invitation represented official recognition that what had started as a science project by 5 children had become an example of educational excellence. Mrs. Victoria gathered the group to share the news. "Everyone, you've received a very special invitation. The Secretary of Education wants you to present your project at a statewide seminar for other educators." "That's amazing," exclaimed Olivia. "Does that mean our ideas will help other schools too?" "Exactly. You've created something that could influence the education of many other children." Abigail Wilson grew thoughtful. "Ms. Victoria, does this mean we won? That people like Mr. Williams couldn't stop us?" "It's not about winning or losing, Abigail. It's about showing there's a better way to do things, and you did that." Zoe raised an important concern. "But what about Tyler? He's feeling more and more isolated. We don't want anyone to feel left out." Zoe's worry for the well-being of even those who had tried to hurt her showed just how deep her transformation had been. "What if we invited Tyler to join the seminar?" Nathan suggested. "Do you think he'd accept?" Madison asked. "Only one way to find out," Ethan said. "Let's ask him." That afternoon, the 6 of them approached Tyler during recess. He was sitting alone, clearly uneasy with the shift in social dynamics at school. "Tyler," Zoe said, "can we talk to you?" "What do you want?" "Came to gloat." "We're not here to gloat. We're here with an invitation." "What kind of invitation?" "We've been asked to present our project at a state seminar, and we wanted to know if you'd like to join us." Tyler was genuinely surprised. It was the last thing he expected to hear. "Why would you invite me? I did everything I could to make things harder for you." "Because we've learned that when you exclude people, everyone loses," Abigail said. "Even when those people weren't kind to you. And because we think you have qualities that could help the project," Olivia added. "What qualities?" Tyler asked, genuinely curious. "You're a natural leader," Nathan said. "The problem isn't your ability to lead, it's how you were using that ability." "And you're smart and articulate," Madison said. "If you used those skills to include people instead of pushing them away, it'd be amazing." "You're serious?" Tyler asked, his voice slightly unsteady. "We are," Ethan said. "I've learned it's much better to be part of a group that values you than to lead one built on putting others down." Tyler was silent for several minutes, processing the offer. His whole life he'd been taught that strength came from exclusion, that power came from making others feel small. But here was another way. Strength through inclusion, power by lifting others up. "If I say yes," he finally said, "you won't keep bringing up the things I did wrong?" "No," Zoe said. "Everyone deserves a fresh start." "And you won't treat me like I'm beneath you just because I was wrong before?" "Tyler," Abigail said, "if we did that, we'd be acting exactly like you used to, and we've learned that doesn't work." At that moment, Tyler made one of the hardest decisions of his life. He chose to let go of everything he'd believed about superiority and hierarchy and try something entirely new. "Okay," he said, "I'll join, but I'll need help. I don't know how to be part of a real group." "We'll show you," Nathan said, with a smile. "It's easier than you think." And so the group of 6 became 7. Tyler's transformation wasn't instant or easy. He'd spent 11 years believing in innate superiority, and unlearning those habits took constant effort. In the early days, he'd instinctively try to take charge, give orders, make decisions for everyone. But each time, the others gently reminded him that real leadership means helping everyone participate, not controlling them. There were moments he grew frustrated and nearly gave up. Working in true collaboration was much harder than simply bossing others around. It required listening, considering different perspectives, and letting go of control. But gradually, he began to experience something he had never felt before: the satisfaction of seeing others shine because of his positive contribution. Instead of feeling important by putting others down, he began to feel important by helping others grow. The first project Tyler truly participated in was organizing the state seminar. His natural talent for organization and presentation, combined with his new collaborative attitude, proved invaluable to the group. He took on the responsibility of coordinating the logistics of the presentation, ensuring everyone had the time and space they needed to contribute. It was a leadership role, but one that served the group rather than exploiting it. During rehearsals for the seminar, something interesting happened. Other students at the school, seeing Tyler's transformation, began to question their own attitudes. If someone who had been so prejudiced could change, maybe they too could examine and improve their own behaviors. The entire school began to transform. Student groups formed no longer based on social class or status, but on shared interests and complementary skills. Bullying dropped dramatically because the school's culture had shifted from competition to collaboration. Instead of gaining status by belittling others, students learned to earn respect by lifting others up. Teachers noticed widespread academic improvements because students who once felt inadequate now had the confidence to participate and contribute. Families began reporting positive changes in their children's behavior at home: more empathy, fewer sibling conflicts, and greater interest in collaborative activities. But the most significant change was in the students' own self-perception. Children who once saw themselves as smart or dumb, popular or rejected, important or insignificant, began to see themselves as unique individuals with valuable contributions to make. The state seminar took place on a Saturday in the auditorium of the State Department of Education in Sacramento. Educators from across the state were there to learn about transformative collaborative practices. The 7 students presented not just their original project, but the entire journey of transformation that had taken place in their school. They spoke about early conflicts, the resistance they faced, and how they overcame prejudices to build a truly inclusive community. The most impactful part of the presentation was when Tyler spoke about his own transformation. "I used to think being a leader meant being better than others," he told an audience of over 200 educators. "But I discovered that true leadership means helping others discover the best in themselves." He shared how he had tried to sabotage the group, the pressure from his family to maintain prejudiced attitudes, and how he had chosen to change. "The hardest part was admitting I was wrong," he said. "But the most liberating part was realizing that admitting I was wrong gave me the chance to learn something better." The presentation ended with the 7 demonstrating in real time how they worked together to solve a complex problem. They were given an impromptu challenge to create a proposal for reducing food waste at school. In 15 minutes, working in front of the audience, they developed a complete plan involving nutrition education, composting, food redistribution, and community engagement. Each member contributed different perspectives, and the result was a comprehensive solution none of them could have created alone. The audience was impressed not only by the quality of the solution, but by the collaborative process they witnessed. Experienced educators realized they were seeing a practical demonstration of how education could function at its best. After the presentation, the 7 were surrounded by dozens of educators eager to learn more about implementing similar practices in their own schools. But the most moving moment came when the State Department of Education Secretary himself approached. "The group, you 7 just gave me a lesson in education I'll never forget," he said. "You showed that true education isn't about transferring information, but about developing people." He announced that the state would create a pilot program based on the principles developed by the 7, and that they would be invited to advise its implementation in other schools. It was the final acknowledgement that what had begun as a science project had become a revolutionary educational model. But when they returned home that night, the achievement they were most proud of wasn't the official recognition. It was the fact that they had transformed not only their own lives, but the lives of their entire school community. Zoe, sitting on the bus beside her mother on the way home, reflected on the whole journey. "Mum, remember when you told me that sometimes people only change when they see something better than what they know?" "I do remember, sweetheart. I think that's what happened. We didn't win over Tyler and the others by arguing with them. We won by showing them a better way to live." "And you figured that out on your own?" "No, Mom. I learned it from my friends, and they learned from me. And we all learned that we're stronger together than apart." Denise smiled, seeing how her daughter had grown not just in knowledge but in wisdom. "And what do you want to do with everything you've learned?" "I want to keep learning, Mom, and I want to keep teaching, because I've realized those two things are actually the same." In the following months, the school continued to transform. The pilot program was officially implemented, with support from the state government and interest from universities wanting to study the model. But for the 7, what mattered most wasn't the outside attention. It was seeing how their school community had become a place where every person was valued for their unique qualities. Students who once felt inadequate discovered talents they never knew they had. Teachers who had lost motivation rediscovered their passion for education. Families once divided by prejudice found common ground. Bullying didn't disappear completely, but it decreased dramatically because the school's culture had changed. Instead of a hierarchy based on social status, there was a support network built on human worth. Diversity was no longer seen as a problem to manage, but as a resource to celebrate. Students from different economic, ethnic, and social backgrounds worked together naturally. And most importantly, the children were learning not just academic content, but essential life skills like empathy, collaboration, conflict resolution, and servant leadership. At the end of the school year, there was a closing celebration honoring not just academic achievements, but the personal and community transformations that had taken place. Richard Williams, who had transferred Tyler to a private school at the start of the second semester, unexpectedly showed up at the event. He had heard about the school's accomplishments and his own son's transformation and was wrestling with his own convictions. He approached Denise Thompson during the celebration. "Mrs. Thompson, may I speak with you?" "Of course, Mr. Williams. I wanted to apologize for what I did to your daughter, for what I tried to do to the school." "You don't need to apologize, Mr. Williams. Everyone did what they thought was right at the time." "But I was wrong, completely wrong. And now I see my son unhappy at his new school because he discovered a better way to connect with people and can no longer accept the competitive and exclusionary environment from before. You can bring Tyler back if you want. You'd really take me back after everything I did? Mr. Williams, if we accepted your son after everything he did, why wouldn't we accept you?" The conversation was a moment of deep humility for Richard, who realized he had spent months fighting against something that was actually good for his own son. The following semester, Tyler returned to his original school. His reunion with the group was emotional because they had all grown and changed during their time apart. "Do you miss it?" was the first question he asked. "Very much," Zoe replied. "You're part of our story. Without you, we wouldn't have learned some of the most important lessons." "What lessons?" "That people can change," said Abigail. "That we should never give up on anyone, even when they're not being kind to us. And that some of the best friendships come from the most unexpected places," Ethan added. Tyler's reintegration was natural and joyful. He had spent months practicing the principles of collaboration at his new school, where he was seen as an exceptionally empathetic and inclusive student. But he had missed the community where he had learned those lessons, and he was happy to be back home. During the second year of the project, the 7 expanded their activities beyond the school. They began working with local community organizations, applying the principles of collaboration to solve real neighborhood problems. They organized cleanup events where different age groups worked together. They created tutoring programs where teenagers helped younger children with homework. They developed community gardens where families from different backgrounds shared knowledge and resources. Every project reinforced the same fundamental lesson. Diversity combined with collaboration produces better results than any homogeneous group could achieve. The group's influence spread organically to other schools in the area. Students and teachers came to observe their practices and gradually implemented adaptations in their own communities. The model became known as comprehensive collaborative education, and universities began studying it as an example of how education could be transformed to better prepare students for an increasingly interconnected and diverse world. But for the seven, success wasn't measured in external recognition. It was measured in small daily victories: a shy student gaining the confidence to participate in discussions, an aggressive student learning to resolve conflicts through dialogue, a student who felt inferior discovering their unique talents. At the end of the second year, as they prepared to transition to high school, the seven reflected on their entire journey. "Do you think we proved our original hypothesis?" Madison asked. "What hypothesis?" Nathan replied. "That collaboration works better than competition, that diversity is a strength, that everyone has something valuable to contribute." "More than proved," Olivia said. "We lived that hypothesis and watched it transform our entire school." "And we also proved something we didn't expect," Ethan added. "What?" "That real change is possible, that people can let go of prejudices and embrace something better, that unfair systems can be transformed when brave people come together." Tyler, who had become the group member most passionate about social justice, made a profound observation. "You know what I find most amazing? That we started out just wanting to do a science project and ended up discovering how to make the world better." "Maybe it's always like that," said Abigail. "Maybe changing the world always starts with small groups of people who decide to do something different. And maybe the most important science is the science of how people can live well together," added Zoe. At that moment, the seven of them realized they had learned something many adults take decades to discover, if they ever do, that the highest purpose of education and life is to learn how to create communities where every person can flourish. They didn't know exactly what the future held for them, but they knew they had gained the tools to face any challenge, the ability to value differences, to work collaboratively, to turn conflicts into opportunities for growth, and to never give up on the possibility that people and situations can improve. And most importantly, they had learned that genuine, lasting change doesn't come from imposition or force, but from demonstrating in practice that there's a better way to live. When the day of their elementary school graduation arrived, there was a special ceremony to celebrate not just academic achievements, but the personal and community transformations that had taken place. The director of the Municipal Education Department gave the keynote speech and devoted much of it to talking about the impact that group of students had had, not only on their own school, but on the entire regional education system. "You've proven that students can be not just recipients of education, but creators of positive social change," he said, looking directly at the seven of them. "You've taught us that true education transforms not just individuals, but entire communities." But the most moving moment came when Mrs. Victoria took the microphone for her farewell speech. "During my 10 years as principal of this school," she said, "I've learned many lessons, but the most important one was taught to me by 7 students who showed me that educational courage means supporting good ideas even when they're challenging." She looked at the 7 of them, seated in the front row. "You taught me that. An educator's role isn't just to pass on knowledge, but to facilitate the discovery of wisdom. And wisdom, I've learned, is knowing how to use knowledge to create a better world." When it was time for the student speeches, Zoe was chosen by the class to speak on behalf of everyone. "3 years ago," she began, "I came to this school thinking education was about learning facts and getting good grades. Today I know education is about learning to be a better person and helping others be better people too." She looked at her 6 friends. "I've learned that the smartest thing a person can do is recognize they need others to be whole. I've learned that the strongest thing a person can do is lift others up. And I've learned that the most important thing a person can do is never give up on the possibility that the world can be better. But the most valuable lesson I learned was taught by someone who started as my opponent and became one of my closest friends." She glanced at Tyler. I learned that people can change, that hearts can open, and that the greatest enemies can become the strongest allies. And I learned that real change doesn't happen when we defeat others, but when we inspire others to join us in building something better. The speech ended with prolonged applause, but the most meaningful part was seeing tears in the eyes of many adults present, including some who had initially opposed the project of the Seven. After the ceremony, during the celebration, something touching happened. Richard Williams approached the group, accompanied by his wife. "Everyone," he said, visibly emotional, "I spent 2 years fighting against you because I was afraid of the ideas you represented." "Why were you afraid?" Abigail Wilson asked gently. "Because I thought if my son learned that all people are valuable, he'd lose the advantage I was trying to give him." "And what do you think now?" Nathan Carter asked. "Now I see the advantage you gave him is worth far more than any advantage I could buy. You taught my son to be someone others want to be around, trust and follow. That's worth more than any social status." Richard's wife, who had stayed quiet throughout the controversy, finally spoke. "You gave me back my son," she said, her voice trembling. "For 2 years I watched him become more bitter and isolated. You showed him how to be truly happy." It was a moment of deep reconciliation, symbolizing the transformation that had taken place in the entire community. As the evening went on and families began saying goodbye, the Seven gathered one last time as their elementary school group. "Do you think we'll stay friends in high school?" Madison asked with genuine concern. "Madison," said Tyler, who had become surprisingly wise about friendships, "we might not always be in the same classroom, but we'll always be connected by what we built together. And no matter where we go," Ethan added, "we'll carry these principles with us and spread them to others." "It's true," Olivia agreed. "We've become multipliers of an idea bigger than any of us." "And you know what's really cool?" Nathan said. "We proved kids can change the world. We don't have to wait to grow up to make a difference." "Actually," Abigail said thoughtfully, "I think we've already changed the world. At least our little corner of it." Zoe looked at her 6 friends and felt deep gratitude for the journey they'd shared. "Everyone, no matter what happens in the future, I want you to know you taught me the most important thing a person can learn, that life gets infinitely better when we choose to lift others up instead of competing with them. And you taught us that courage isn't about not being afraid," Tyler said. "It's about doing the right thing even when you are." That night, as each of them returned home, they all carried the certainty that they had been part of something special. Not just a friendship, but a movement. Not just a school project, but a social transformation. And they all knew this was only the beginning. During high school, the 7 spread out to different schools in the area, but stayed in close contact and continued collaborating on community projects. Zoe specialized in math and science, but always focused on social applications. Abigail developed her artistic talents, creating works that promoted inclusion and diversity. Madison became a natural communicator, using her skills to facilitate dialogue between different groups. Nathan deepened his knowledge of nature and sustainability. Olivia excelled in community organizing and participatory leadership. Ethan became interested in social psychology and conflict mediation. Tyler fell in love with human rights and social justice. Each followed their individual calling, but always applying the principles of collaboration and valuing diversity they had learned together. During college, they occasionally reunited to work on special projects. They organized conferences on collaborative education, developed youth leadership programs, and created an alumni network that continued spreading the principles they had discovered. But the most lasting impact wasn't in their own projects. It was in how each influenced the communities where they lived and worked. They became natural multipliers of a life philosophy based on collaboration, inclusion, and mutual growth. Years later, when they were well established in their careers, they still gathered annually to celebrate the anniversary of the project that had changed their lives. At one of these reunions, 20 years after the original presentation, they received a special visit. Mrs. Victoria, now retired but still sharp and energetic. "I wanted to thank you," she said, "for teaching me that education isn't about controlling students. It's about unlocking potential." "You taught us far more," replied Zoe, now a university professor specializing in collaborative pedagogy, you taught us that courageous adults can support young ideas even when facing pressure not to. And you showed us that institutional change is possible when people in positions of authority choose to do the right thing, added Tyler, who had become a human rights lawyer. Do you know what the most beautiful outcome of all this was? Mrs. Victoria asked. What? They all replied. That school became a model. For the next 20 years, hundreds of educators visited to learn about the collaborative approach, and many implemented versions of it in their own schools. You mean our idea spread? Asked Abigail, now an art director for an organization promoting inclusion through the arts. It spread and keeps spreading. There are entire networks of schools using principles derived from your original project. That's amazing, said Madison, who had become a professional mediator specializing in community conflicts. But do you know what I find most amazing? Mrs. Victoria continued. You proved that lasting social change can start with children who decide to do something different. Nathan, now a biologist specializing in social ecology, made a thoughtful observation. Maybe it's always like that. Maybe the best ideas come from people who haven't yet learned that certain things are impossible. And maybe the role of education is to preserve that ability to imagine better possibilities, added Olivia, who had become a community development specialist. And to create environments where those possibilities can become reality, concluded Ethan, now a psychologist specializing in group dynamics and conflict resolution. That evening, the seven reflected on the extraordinary journey they had lived. It had begun with a new girl at school facing bullying and prejudice. It ended with an educational transformation that had influenced thousands. But for them, the real measure of success wasn't in statistics or recognition. It was in the fact that each had become the best version of themselves and had helped many others do the same. Do you think we managed to change the world? Madison asked, echoing the question they had posed decades earlier. We changed our world, Zoe answered, and our world became part of bigger worlds, which became part of even bigger ones. And we proved that change doesn't have to be dramatic to be profound, said Abigail. Sometimes the most powerful change is simply treating people with the respect and appreciation they deserve, and that every person has the potential to contribute something unique and valuable, added Nathan. We just need to create environments where that potential can flourish, and that true collaboration doesn't mean everyone is the same, said Olivia. It means each person's differences are valued and used for the common good, and that real leadership isn't about having power over others, said Ethan. It's about using whatever power you have to help others discover and develop their own strengths. And that people can change, said Tyler, with the authority of someone who had lived that transformation. We should never give up on anyone, because we never know when someone is ready to discover a better version of themselves. And that the most important education isn't about what we learn, concluded Zoe, but about how we use what we learn to create a world where everyone can thrive. That night, as everyone returned home after the gathering, they all carried the same certainty they had felt 20 years earlier, that they had been part of something bigger than themselves, something that would continue to influence the world long after they were gone. And they all knew that the most important lesson they had learned, and were still teaching, was simple yet revolutionary, that the world improves when we choose to see and value the best in people, rather than focusing on what they lack or don't. No. It was a lesson that had begun with bullies picking on the wrong black girl, and had ended with the discovery that the right response to cruelty isn't greater cruelty, but building something so beautiful and powerful that it renders cruelty irrelevant. And so what had started as a story about bullying and prejudice became a story about hope, transformation, and the boundless power of true human collaboration. End of story. Now tell us what you thought about Zoe and her friend's story. How do you see the transformation that took place at the school? Do you believe collaboration can be more powerful than competition? Share your reflections on this incredible journey in the comments. Thank you so much for being here. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other inspiring stories that show the power of unity and mutual respect.